Meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. It's October 10th, 2017. The Board of Selectmen was in executive session from 6 to 7, and we were discussing ongoing litigation with regards to, let's see, the address at, it doesn't say the address. Purpose of discussing strategy with respect to litigation, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A and 21A, Rotondo Enterprises versus R&L Main Street Associates. And so that executive session is concluded. I would ask all members of the Board of Selectmen are indeed present, and I would ask all in attendance to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's always nice to see a full house of fellow citizens. There are seats, people are certainly welcome to stand, but Joe, there's a seat up here in the front, so make sure that everyone is comfortable. So we do have some treasury warrants to approve, 13, 13A, 14, and 14A. I would accept a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on those? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. We have a couple of sets of minutes to approve, those of August 15th, November 28th, and December 12th. I can take them up individually unless someone would like to take them up as a group. It's to your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain from the discussion.
That said, why don't we take them up individually? August 15th, the minutes of. I would accept a motion to approve as written, or...
Motion to accept August 15, 2016.
Motion's made and seconded by Mr. Bendel. Any discussion on those? All in favor? Unanimous, with the exception of Ed, who is abstaining and was not here for that. The minutes of November 28th, 2016.
So moved.
Motion's made.
Second.
And seconded. Discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
With one abstention.
Oh, with one abstention, sorry. Thank you for correcting me. And lastly, December 12th, 2016.
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? 4 and 1 abstention. Thank you. Those are the minutes. Two seats up front for anyone that feels so inclined. A couple of things I just wanted to mention real quick. You might notice that each of us up here at the front table are wearing an item of pink. As many people I'm sure are aware, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and so we will be emblazoned with something pink at each of our meetings this month in hopes of bringing attention and awareness to breast cancer, in hopes that that awareness translates to action, funding, and hopefully eventually a cure. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. I also want to acknowledge that we are joined by Jackie Laverty as our assistant to the right here today, and she's stepping in for Beverly Dalton, who is at home convalescing, and we all extend to Beverly our best wishes and hopes for a speedy recovery. So our 7 o'clock scheduled appointment is with Mr. Mario Marchese, who is the master of Friendship Lodge, who's going to come in and join us, Mr. Marchese, and present to us what's happening over at Friendship Lodge here in Wilmington, and give us an update.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Good evening. As you know, I'm Master Friendship Lodge or presiding officer. I have a quick little presentation I like to give, a little thing, and then a little spiel I have about friendship. And then I have, at the end, Mr. Chairman, if I may approach, I have a few parting gifts for the members of the Board of Selectmen.
If you want to approach with parting gifts, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And on July 30th, 1733, Henry Price, a Boston merchant, authorized to constitute one or more regular lodges by the Premier Grand Lodge in London, chartered the first duly constituted lodge in the New World. On the basis of this precedence, the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts was established. It now holds the distinction of being the 3rd Grand Lodge in the world and the oldest in the Western Hemisphere. Since then, Freemasonry has spread across the country and around the world. In doing so, it attracted some of our most notable figures, including founding fathers Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and Paul Revere. 13 other U.S. presidents, author Mark Twain, and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And today's men of accomplishment, such as astronaut and Senator John Glenn, Apple co-founder Mark Wozniak, and NFL Hall of Famer New England Patriot John Hanna. Before these men achieved the greatness we recognize them for, they were all Masons. We are proud that many famous men have been brothers, but Freemasonry has also helped develop greatness in countless others whose names are not well known. Men who have made their families, workplaces, and communities better because of their association with our fraternity. And though there are differences between these men, they have come from every country, religion, race, background, and opinion. Whether famous or not, they are united by Freemasonry's teaching of brotherly love, relief, and truth. Friendship Lodge has continued this tradition of Freemasonry in the town of Wilmington since 1901. For over 116 years, Friendship Lodge has been a part of the Wilmington community. Over 80% of our membership live in the town of Wilmington. In essence, Wilmington is Friendship Lodge. I'm here tonight to talk to the Board of Selectmen about a few of our community programs that we have at Friendship Lodge, and to let the community at large know what we're here for and what we'd like to do for the community. One of the programs that we have at Friendship Lodge is called our Hospital Equipment Loan Program, or HELP for short. Basically what it is Friendship Lodge, along with several other lodges in the area, come together and actually loan out hospital equipment to those in need. The equipment could range from a wheelchair, a walker, to a hospital bed, or any other equipment that we have. Most of the equipment is donated to us that we take in, repair, clean, and give out to the public. The only thing that we ask in return is once the equipment is done and there's no longer of use, that's returned to us that we may repair and clean and give back out to another needed family. Another program that we have here at Friendship is we have a ramp program, which started over 15 years ago with one ramp that was donated to Friendship Lodge, has expanded to over 40 ramps that we now have within the Wilmington and surrounding areas. These ramps are given out to the community as a service to those in need. And again, all that we ask in the end is that once the ramp is of no longer use, that the lodge is contacted so that when we go back out, receive the ramp, repair it, and put it out back to another family that's in need. And this program, from what I know, is the only program of its kind in Massachusetts. We get calls from all across the state. Although we are a small lodge, we try to service as many of those as we can. The other program I'd like to talk about briefly is called our Angel Fund, which is probably our nearest and dearest fund that we have. And it's called the Angel Fund because it helps those truly in need, the children. Basically what we do at Friendship Lodge is we reach out to the local school administrators, faculty, guidance counselors, and nurses, and ask them if there's any child within the Wilmington community that's of any need, whether it would be eyeglasses, clothing, hearing aid, food, or even shelter. If we have the ability to help that child, we will do so. And the only thing that we ask in return is that the child and the family never know where the funds came from. Okay, it's not about receiving pride or recognition. It's not about who we are. It's not about what Masons do. It's about helping our community and making ourselves better. And that's what we are at Friendship Lodge. And so here, tonight, what I'd like to do is invite the Board of Selectmen and the entire Wilmington community to come to Friendship Lodge on Saturday, October 21st, which Friendship Lodge, along with all the other Masonic lodges in Massachusetts, will be conducting an open house. From the hours of 9 to 3 o'clock, 9 a.m. to 3, Friendship Lodge will be opening its doors to the public, along with all the other lodges, inviting the public to come in and see our lodge. We have a very historic building. At one time, it used to be the famous Hill Laboratories, which those who know Wilmington, quack medicine was actually created there. Very interesting building. But we invite the public to come in, see what our building's about, see what Freemasonry is about, and see what we are and who we are in the town of Wilmington. And on that very day, we'll also be having a help program that day. So if anyone in the town of Wilmington needs some hospital equipment, come to Friendship Lodge. And if for some reason you can't come there on the 21st, there is an ongoing help program in Woburn that's held by these other lodges. It's located at 500 West Cummings Park in Woburn. And every Saturday from 9 to 12 o'clock, those doors are flung open to the public. So if any equipment that you need, if they have it, they'll give it out to you. And also on the same day, just so that everyone knows about our ramp program, we will be demonstrating a few of our ramps, how we assemble them, how we're able to fit them to any house, any accommodation, the size of the ramps and what we can do for people. So that's all I'm here for, to let people know who we are and what we do.
And we appreciate you doing so. Thank you, Mario. I want to make sure I give the opportunity to my colleagues to say hello and ask any questions they may
Absolutely.
have. Mr. Bendel, I see your hand, so
Sure.
please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marchese, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate that. And it's nice to have you here because obviously you represent a great organization that probably doesn't get a ton of spotlight other than you bringing this to us. So I really appreciate you doing that and reminding the community of all the great things you have to offer. So I really appreciate what you do for families in Wilmington, and I hope you'll get a great turnout on the 21st. And again, thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mario, thanks for the presentation. I do agree with Mr. Bendel. You do a lot for the community and the residents of Wilmington, things that I didn't even realize. So I'm glad you're here, that you brought this out with the ramps and the hospital equipment. It's amazing the amount of charitable work that your organization does for not only this community, but the surrounding communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll continue to go right in line. I'll say thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the work that your organization is doing for your neighbors. It's you live as an example, so hopefully the other folks from around the community, as they witness the good works that you are doing, or that you and your organization are doing, they will feel inspired to do the same. And I guess that's all we can ever ask in life, is just to try to give back a little bit more than you take from this world. And so you guys are doing that every single day. So my compliments to you, and my thanks to you for being here and illustrating how you're doing that here in our community. Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mario, I've known you for a long time. You're a real classy guy. You've got a great organization, like other organizations that give back to the community, but, it's a fantastic organization, and some folks are just hearing maybe for the first time what you actually do, and where's the building? It's next to the old fire department, right there with the princes and the castles right there, And it's a great organization, and, folks, somebody needs a hip replacement or something like that, you are the go-to people to go for something like that, and it's outstanding. So on behalf of many residents, thank you. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Mario. I know it's a great organization. In my youth, I was a past master counselor in DeMolay, so down in Woburn. So
Oh, good.
I know what the Freemasons are about, but I appreciate you bringing it to not just the board here, but everyone in town. And we really appreciate what you do. So thank you.
Thank you. As Mr. Chairman, as I promised, I have a few parting gifts. So, for the Board of Selectmen. It's already no more pots. Thank you. And here in the back is probably a little bit more about kind of what I talked about. So if you want to learn more about Freemasonry, feel free and give me a call anytime.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, certainly, Greg. Yeah. There are, Greg is going to bring over 2 chairs. There's 2 over in the corner here and 1 in the front. Sorry about the folks that are standing. Normally we're not packed to the gills as we are this evening. Thank you, Greg. So our 7:10 scheduled appointment is with Valerie Gingrich, our Director of Planning and Conservation, with regards to a presentation and discussion, ongoing discussion about affordable housing and the implications for development and zoning. Valerie, good evening. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. Unless there's a specific introduction you wanted to enter into?
Let me just introduce the subject. As the board knows, we've had several discussions in the last few months about the town's affordable housing situation. As you know, we are at the 10% limit right now, just slightly above that, which essentially means that the town is not subject to the prospect of so-called Chapter 40B development, which are developments that can, in which the developer basically can, in large measure, control the density and type of development. They can develop in any particular zone in town. They do have to go to the Board of Appeals, but essentially the intent of the law, as I understand it, was to promote affordable housing in the Commonwealth. So the premise is that if a community does not maintain at least 10% of its housing stock as affordable, and that term is kind of relative, but if a community does not have that 10%, dips below it, then it becomes subject to these 40B projects. Wilmington, as I noted, is at 10%, but every 10 years when the census is recalculated, that number is subject to change. As was noted in prior conversations with the Board of Selectmen, the expectation is that we are highly likely, or in fact will dip below the 10%, and so perhaps be subject to 40B developments. So Valerie is here tonight to continue that conversation. At the last meeting where this was brought forward, the board had requested that she take a look at what other communities are doing in terms of addressing 40B. So that is the principal part of the discussion this evening.
Thank you. So Valerie, I'll turn it over, and we're anxious to hear what else you have for us.
Great. Okay, well, with the help of our Regional Housing Service Office, we compiled some information which you have in front of you. And I'd like to go through kind of town by town just to talk about their percentage and what they're doing to address affordable housing in their town. Starting with Reading, which is at 8.67%. So they're under the 10%. They have achieved, because they've had 3 40B projects come forward within the last, probably within the last year or so, or less than a year, with totaling 98 units with all 3 projects. They've achieved what's called a safe harbor. So that, because they've created 98 units, which is 1% of their total housing stock, and they have an approved housing production plan, they get to have sort of a freeze on 40Bs for 2 years. So you need both of those 2 components. You need a housing production plan, and you need to create 0.5% of your total units, and then you get a year of kind of safety. So they created double that, so they get 2 years safety, which gets them to 2019. So they get a little bit of time to sort of sit back and do a little bit more proactive, but also kind of shape any projects that come forward. So I can kind of, if there's any questions at any point, I'm available to answer those.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Sorry. Thank you, Valerie, for being here. Appreciate your presentation. Just a quick question on Reading specifically. 8.67 as of today. In the projects you just described, where there's 93 units in total, did the town build those, or did a private developer?
The town did not. They're 40B projects, so they're private developers coming in and building both market rate and affordable units, denser than their zoning allows. One of the projects was, I think I have it written down, a small project, like 10 units, but then there was a project that was 68 units, there was a project that was 20 units, but those are private developers coming in and doing at least 25% affordable, and then market rate in addition. But they're building denser than they would normally be allowed.
And a follow-up question, if I may, was that built on town-owned land that was sold, or was that on a private property
Private property.
that was sold to the developer?
Private property that's owned by the developer, or, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
right. Reading isn't in our situation where they don't really have town-owned land that they can kind of do things with. I'm learning that it's not a common thing to have town-owned land, or at least a lot of town-owned land. North Reading has some, and I'll get to them. And they're actually really interested in what we're going to do, because they do have some town-owned parcels, and they've talked about using those for a type of affordable housing project, but they haven't quite got to the point where they've done it. And whenever I kind of talk about that we have town-owned land, other towns say, wow, I don't have any. So it's a unique situation that we have, and it's a good thing to be able to have choices, I guess. So Safe Harbor, I went over that. North Reading is at 9.65%, and they're doing some planning right now to figure out how to get over the 10%. Some of that could include using some of that town-owned land to do, to put an RFP out for a developer to build something. But they haven't done that yet. Andover is at 13.28%, and they've gotten over their 10% with 40B projects. Over 200, actually each of the projects were 250 units. So large projects, few of those in Andover, 3 of them, and those numbers put them over the 10%. They do have some special permits in town that require multifamily housing to have at least 15% of it be affordable, which I know is something we've talked about, inclusionary zoning, where when people are building a project, requiring a certain percentage of those units to be affordable, which is something that, I think that we should pursue and that we should kind of work on. The challenge is getting it right, I guess, knowing what percentage to require in your zoning, whether it's 10% or 15% or somewhere in between. And then it's always sort of a conversation with the development community as far as, in their minds, we're taking profit away, right? So they say, well, shouldn't there be some sort of additional density? Give me those 3 units so that I can build them as affordable. So it'll be sort of I think a discussion that we can have over the next year or so to talk about what the right percentage is and how we pursue that type of idea.
Valerie, the inclusionary zoning discussion is one, and you just said it, so I think there's probably ample opportunity going forward for more conversation specifically on that, and I know that's not been presented here, but, and maybe just it's not even a question, it's just a suggestion, is because I feel fuzzy at best on how that would work or what it would look like potentially. I want to be very considerate of, the free market economy and all that, but I also want to be cognizant of what happens over the course of 10 years of regular market rate development. Do we find ourselves in I can't do the math,
30?
2029 scrambling to try to
Right.
do what we're kind of doing now again.
Right.
So the inclusionary would ultimately, hopefully, organically create an environment that we wouldn't have to scramble after 10 years?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And some towns have done 10%, which you might just be shy of where you need to be if you're just requiring that 10%, because there's usually some sort of, let's say, if someone's building, 3 units, you're not going to require one of them to be affordable, right? Because that's a lot of your units. Right. So usually there's sort of, if you're building more than 10 units, you have to do 10% affordable. Well, some of those smaller, like 9 units, you're not doing any affordable. Those types of projects can add up, and you're not providing any affordable with those. So now towns are talking about, well, maybe we should do 12% just to give us a little bit of cushion as we're, going on, so that we're not running into a scramble at the end where we need to create some units to make up the 10%. So that's the kind of discussion that we'll have to have going forward, for sure.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you. Continue. I'm sorry, Ed.
Valerie, why wouldn't that number be higher than 15? Because when you do a 40B, it's usually a minimum of 20%, correct?
Minimum 20, usually it's more like 25%.
Right.
But these would be non-40B projects. So this would just be, projects coming in as market rate and meeting zoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Tewksbury is at 9.66%. They have a housing production plan. I haven't heard back from them about exactly what their strategy is quite yet, but it's kind of an ongoing conversation with all of these towns.
You just need to drive by Mahoney's, you can see their strategy.
Yeah, right. Bill Ricca, 7.74%. Again, I haven't heard back from them, but they've gotten a few 40B applications recently, and I think there's one sort of in the news, in and out of the news lately, since they're under the 10%. Burlington is at 13.33%. They're above the 10%. And they do have an inclusionary bylaw that requires affordable units. I think it was Burlington was one of the places where I think they're having that discussion about maybe upping it a little bit just to, get a few more units as they're going through. Woburn is at 8.74%. They just achieved safe harbor, same as Reading, because they had some approved 40B projects. So they had both of those things, an approved housing plan, and then they've gotten 40B projects of enough quantity to get them to that safe harbor. So they're safe from 40B projects until 2019. They've talked about increasing their affordable housing percentage from 10% to 15%, and looking at some zoning, I believe. Middleton is at 5%. They're working on a housing plan. I was told that they don't get as much 40B interest as other towns because they just don't have sewer anywhere. So I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. Winchester's at 3%. They have a few 40B projects pending, and they're working on a housing plan. They're actually looking at using town-owned land that they have to produce more units. And then I wanted to provide the board with some examples of towns that have used town-owned land and put out land for sale for the creation of affordable units. And there's a list here. Bedford, Concord, Sudbury, Wayland, all have done that. They've actually purchased land for that purpose. They purchased the land, put it out for development of what they thought was appropriate as a project. Those towns, I should note though, that they're CPA towns, so they have the Community Preservation Act, so they can use that extra those tax funds to fund and kind of subsidize affordable units. And that's, some of these projects had some really heavy subsidies from the town. I can go through those specifics if you'd like, but I kind of wanted to kind of leave it open to discussion too. I don't want to talk too much.
Well, the Community Preservation Act stuff and the tax monies, you were over my head on that stuff, so I don't know if you want to get into details, maybe just a little bit more
Yeah.
granular on that.
Sure. So it's if the town votes to adopt the Community Preservation Act, they're actually asking to be taxed a little bit more. I forget what percentage it is. What is
I
it?
think it's up to 3%.
Up to 3. Some have 1%, some have
Right.
2%. So it's an extra tax that towns can use for open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing. So they take that money and they can buy a piece of land and then put it out for development of affordable housing. They can use it to make the units more affordable, affordable, meeting the requirements of the state isn't affordable to everyone. So they can kind of add subsidy to those units to make them even more affordable. So that's sort of the general idea of that. Pretty much all of these, it was land. The land was not, I don't think there was a purchase price for the land. I think the land was pretty much given, and then the town actually provided some subsidy. But that subsidy ensured that there was more affordability. Some of these projects were all affordable units, not any market rate. So, it's a way of making the numbers work, where with a typical project, you could do market rate 75% of it market rate and 25% of it affordable to kind of balance that out a little bit more.
Yeah, these communities aren't abutting Wilmington.
They're not,
and
no.
they probably have surplus land, unlike Wilmington that doesn't have surplus land for use for affordable housing, so so that gives them a little bit more leverage.
Yeah, they also have that CPA funding, so they actually go out and buy these parcels. One of them was an old kind of Nike facility. One of them was an old Coast Guard facility, I believe. So they actually went and purchased those properties with the intent of then having a developer do affordable housing on it. But they have the benefit of those CPA funds to use for purchasing the parcel.
Did you say Coast Guard?
Yeah,
Sudbury Coast Guard?
I know. These are all inland. I know. I don't know. I guess that's why it's not there anymore. I don't.
Valerie, just for the record and for the folks at home, folks that are here, could you just give us another explanation about affordable? That's a very relative
Sure.
term, right? I don't want anybody to get their hopes up and thinking that a Deming Way unit, right, that's state funded is, 30% of your income to live there. I mean,
So, affordable, according to the state, it has to be 80% of the area median income or less. So, area median income in this area is $103,000 with some change, but $103,000 is the area median. So 80% of that, I have to find my number here. 80% for a family of four is you make $78,000 or less. For an individual, it'd be $54,000. So those are sort of the income limits that you can make to qualify for affordable. And at 80%, the rent for an affordable unit is, where do I have it here? A one bedroom is, $12,000. A two bedroom is, I'm sorry, $1,200.
it's definitely not affordable.
That would not be affordable. A one bedroom is $1,200 approximately, and then a two bedroom is $1,400. So, it's not affordable to everyone, but that's sort of a maximum they say is affordable and counts towards your 10% number. You can have it be more affordable and take it down to 60% or 50%, but that often requires some subsidy because the cost of building that unit is going to be higher than you get back from it.
By subsidy, you mean taxation, right?
Or through the state, you can get funding through the state. There's programs through the state that you can get to tax credits and those types of things, but some sort of public money, yes.
And we also need to make it clear to the Wilmington residents who are thinking that affordable housing is going to be just for them. It's not true.
No, so you can have a local preference. Up to 70% of the units can be kind of set aside for local residents. That's at kind of the first presentation of the units. So when those units are ready to go on the market, Wilmington residents would get a first shot at 70% of those units. So it's a pretty good number, but you can't reserve all of them for.
Yeah. And if Wilmington residents do not fill that 70% quota, then it goes out to other individuals as well that are not in Wilmington. So the perception out there that the Wilmington residents are going to be the only ones benefiting from it is not really true. But I just want to make it clear to the residents that come up to us every day and say, we want affordable housing so we can all live there. And in fact, that really isn't going to happen. Okay.
Yeah, I get a lot of people coming in my office and talking to me about it, and I've been very clear about what affordable is and all of the rules associated with it, and folks seem to understand that it's not a Deming Way that we're talking about. It's something different, but what I've heard back from them is that any options are great at this point.
Do the folks know that there's a person that's located in, I don't know if it's Reading or North Reading Town Hall, that we pay a percentage of her salary that she works for, helping people find affordable housing and working with issues. Does the town realize that there's a person out there like that? No. I didn't realize it either until I read something a few months ago. So I just wonder how we're publicizing it for our Wilmington residents to have the opportunity to talk to this person. Actually, she came in here, and that's how we first found out about it. I think she did a presentation, she sat beside you at a presentation, and then
Yeah,
I
well,
inquired
that's-
about it later on and realized that we're paying the bulk of her salary, but she never comes to town hall to have office hours for our residents to talk to her. She's located in Reading. So I was just wondering how you disseminate that information to the town residents, that we have someone out there that you can talk to,
Sure.
other than yourself, and them always
yeah.
knocking on your door.
Yeah, no, anyone who comes in, we give them Laurie's card, and she can put them on a list, an email list, for when there's an affordable unit available in kind of our area, Wilmington, Reading, North Reading. She'll send out an email to all those people, and we have a link on our website to our housing office page, where she lists all the available units.
Well, that's good for the people who come in, and you give them a card.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, do you publicize it other than the website? Do you put it in, the town topics for the town manager, or does it go into the town crier or the Apple, to let people know? Because everybody here is pretty much shaking their head. And I think she might be a good resource
For sure.
for the residents.
Yeah, and well, all of our residents who own affordable units definitely know her, because she helps to do paperwork for them when they're refinancing their home or something like that, or when they're selling their home. There's a process they have to go through. So she sends out periodic letters to the owners of affordable units in town. So they definitely know her and use her as a resource. But we can definitely get the word out. She's not quite a broker, but she definitely has a list. She knows when there's units available, and keeps a spreadsheet of email addresses that she can send. When a unit comes up, she can send out an email. She does come into our office to help us out with projects and paperwork a couple times a month. And she's definitely a good resource. And the woman, I just want to clarify, the woman who was here at the presentation isn't the same woman who's at the Reading Town Hall. So if you see someone different, it's not the same person. The woman who was here for the presentation is a sub-consultant that helps Laurie with projects. So she's a real expert that we sort of hire through Laurie.
So when she comes in a couple times a month, maybe we could advertise it, and she could maybe stay an hour or two out at the conference room in case people want to, or
Sure.
maybe they can set up appointments through you if we
Sure.
know when she's coming in, so she doesn't have to sit there and just,
Yeah.
talk to dead
Yeah,
air, but.
She actually works in that conference room doing projects in there. So
Yeah, okay.
that's perfect. And anyone who wants to talk about affordable housing with our housing consultant is welcome to come in. Just call our office to get the information. We can put it out on our website, and she's always a phone call away too. So
Great.
Laurie, her name is Laurie Stanton, and we're happy to help too.
Go right
All right,
ahead.
yeah, all right.
Mr. McCoy, I think you have something.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're going to be talking about development and zoning a little part of the program, but I just want to talk exactly about affordable housing. I wasn't at the meeting because I took the family on a vacation on August 15th, and I'll touch upon, I did see the meeting, I wrote down some notes, but the meeting Mr. Kyra's alluding to was about 10 months ago in this room, and we talked about affordable housing. And back then, it sounded like some of the members here, and from what I understood from yourself and the other lady that was here, saying that we should probably put an article together at the town meeting because we're going to be above, below that 10%. And I'm saying, why push and I said it back then, I'm not saying it just now, I said it back then, Why push the panic button? We're good till 2020. The state's not going to penalize us. Why don't we just take a breather before we start making all kinds of zoning changes? And I'll talk about the inclusionary zone in about a moment. But there are a few other things we need to talk about relative to the program. But and I'm not just saying it now because folks are here. I said it about 10 months ago. You know, we should step back. We shouldn't push that panic button and start, you know, proposing a 40B somewhere and build hundreds of units because I think that's the failing of some people in this town hall, because what you're going to do is you're going to go to an apartment complex and we're going to get 100% say affordable, but we're going to have a massive unit. It could be anywhere in the town, you know, but, you know, I just don't see the rush in creating extra zoning at the moment. I don't see a rush pushing a panic button to meet that 10% right now. Wait till 2020. Deal with it then. You know, that's how, and I'm not saying because folks are here. I said it 10 months ago when people had no idea what was going on tonight. You know, so I just bring that up, you know, and I know I'm just one person, but I know we're going to talk about development and zoning because I know that's something I did ask to at future plans. I think it's a good idea having you before the board, not because of, say, annual town meeting where a few weeks prior, or 6 weeks prior to the annual town meeting, then all of a sudden a development comes, then a zoning. We really need to be the pipeline. We're the board here that gets yelled at from time to time about this development or this is going on. We don't know about it until almost town meeting time. We need to be involved in the pipeline on what's happening so people are informed on what's going on in town because, you know, development, you know, is important. And I just bring that up, Mr. Chairman. I know we need to talk about other things as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Jeff, I'm going to take personal privilege here and just respond, at least the way my brain is thinking. Then I know the town manager wanted to chime in as well. And certainly, Mike, I agree. It's never prudent to press the panic button. I don't want to do that either. I think the rationale here is to do almost the exact opposite of that, and to hopefully be proactive and be planning ahead now in 2017 for what could potentially come down the pike upon us in 2020 or 2021 and thereafter. And what I get at by saying that is if we put our feet in the sand and dig in and say, listen, let's not make any changes. Things seem to be going okay. In 2020, we know that we're going to be below 10%. It's factual. So those numbers don't lie. So we're going to fall below 10% by 2020. The concern that I have is exactly the concern that you just described, which is that when we're below 10%, we then become vulnerable to a 40B project that we don't have the same level of, really have very little level of say as to where that could go. Currently, we have control over where we can put these kind of developments. So we can work together strategically with the development community and try to do it on our terms before 2020 comes so that we stay at 10% or more. If we let the 10% go below, or if we let ourselves go below 10%, we sit back and we watch. And a development goes into an area that is not zoned for that kind of development, and there's very little that we can do about it. I think that I've articulated it that way. So that's my feeling is, I'd rather be proactive and prepare now rather than wait till 2020 and see what happens. That's my personal feeling on the subject. Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to...
I think you captured a lot of the points I was going to make. The intent of the 40B law is to encourage communities to provide for affordable, so-called affordable housing. And so communities can do that in one of a couple of ways. They can either be proactive and provide the ability, the mechanisms for more affordable units to come about and sustain themselves over the 10% level, either through inclusionary, which is a longer-term solution that's not going to help us out immediately, but in the longer term, it's going to allow us to keep pace with the continued development. And certainly one of the other options is to provide for locations where affordable development can take place. In the absence of that, if we take no action whatsoever and let the market conditions play out, then there's no question that in 2020, the town of Wilmington will be below 10%. So then it becomes, I guess, a question of Russian roulette as to when or if developers come in and decide that they want to put in a 40B development, which is at a higher density than the zoning would typically allow for. It may be in a general business district, it could be in a residential 10 district, a residential 20 district. The town has no ability whatsoever to dictate that. That's all subject to the developer. So, you know, I guess in the end, I think the board and the town as a whole has got to decide, are you prepared to go below the 10% and I guess whatever the consequences are, they play out.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Greg.
If I may. Forgive me, Valerie, I forgot to mention at the beginning that I was one of the people who asked you to get this information together for us last time, so thank you for doing so. I'm also challenged by this, I mean, because not only we look around, there are quite a few communities that are currently below, and us being at 10% and, you know, hoping not to go below. The last time you were here, we talked about the number of projects so far to date, right? And we were on a pretty good pace. I mean, so far in 2017, I think the last time we were here was maybe June or something, was we were approaching halfway through the year, and we were on a pretty good pace to have a lot of homes built, right? There's a lot of projects on the books. I think I'm not a developer, but, you know, you can look around and see that there's a lot of things going on. I think back to the previous town meeting or the one before, we rezoned up by across from Textron where Walpole is. There, you know, there's a project on the books there. There's another project up on Andover Street. And those projects, are they included in that number you provided with us? You know, we were on pace for the number of units this year and next year, or were they not included?
The numbers I gave you were just building permits, so.
So somebody who already pulled a permit to build
Right.
something, not who has a plan to build something.
Right,
So-
right, so those permitted projects are gonna add, you know, units as we're going through the next couple years. So they're included in that we know there's gonna be a steady flow. But the numbers I gave you were just building permits to date. And even if no more units were built after today, we still have enough new units built to fall below the 10%.
Yeah. But I appreciate Mr. McCoy's comments because, you know, we're not involved in private development, you know, and so developer A might be at home tonight drawing up plans to build X amount of units, and here we are. So it's challenging, you know. The other thing I wanted to bring up here, because I think it's relevant, is that the town spent an awful lot of money to have this facilities master plan put together, which we're still awaiting the results. And I know there's a possibility of a proposal in sometime in the future that the community will have to vote on. So I'm challenged by the fact that I don't want to be taking on too much. I mean, the taxpayers are paying for a beautiful high school, and I said it before, some think we're paying for a new middle school, but those projects, I think, would change the way I think about this situation here with the 40B.
Yeah, so when,
And excuse me, let me just finish by saying, if it includes, and I think you're going to go on to talk about in a minute, selling off town-owned land, which taxpayers, in some instances, voted to pay for in recent years.
right.
Did you have something, another part of the response there?
Well, I was just gonna go into how that type of thing works in other towns, but I can wait if there's more.
Please do.
But yeah, no, you were right, I was gonna go into that.
Well, I guess
Not a mind reader.
It's
I'll
right there, yeah.
respond, Greg, if I may, to you.
Sure.
Certainly the facilities master plan and any potential project that gets identified from that, just being clear that the facilities master plan doesn't say we're going to start spending money on all these projects. It puts together a roadmap for what are the projects that would be, you know, next on the radar screen, as it were. So you're talking about spending money. Managing a 40B or managing the affordable housing population has no bearing in cost to the taxpayer, unless I'm missing a point.
Well,
What are the
forgive me.
costs?
I'm reading here in the memo from Valerie, and I don't want to steal your thunder here, but you're talking about proposing an article to sell off some town-owned land at an upcoming town meeting. Is that correct?
Cost.
That's a. If I had a guess, I would know which one it was, and taxpayers voted to pay for that in recent years. So when I talk about, spending taxpayer dollars, I equate that to be taxpayer dollars, the sale of a town-owned property.
Most assuredly. Okay, so that's fair. It's the sale of town-owned property, so I don't think anyone's necessarily suggesting we just hand it over to anybody.
No.
A, and B, I think, can we navigate into that portion of the conversation?
Definitely.
Sorry, I jumped ahead. But
No,
No,
that's
it's a
fine. I
great
think it's
I'm new
transition.
with this.
it's an appropriate time to do so.
Jim, can I just ask?
Yeah, please do, Ed. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Valerie, I've been involved in a lot of the 40B projects. I've never heard of a housing production plan. That's a new term for me. Tonight I'm learning that and reading this. I know we don't have one. Are we thinking of getting one?
Well, we did one, I think it was in 2004. So we did one at one point. And really all the same principles we're still talking about, actually. Where that plan looked at, how we own smaller parcels scattered around town.
Yep.
It looked at using some of those for small little single families that could be affordable. We're talking about the same idea, today, just kind of trying to figure out which of those parcels would be appropriate to build on. And, a parcel here and there doesn't get you a lot of numbers, but it's something that we're definitely trying to look at so that those.
The reason why I ask is with some kind of housing production plan and maybe an inclusionary bylaw, which would create affordable housing, would that give us some kind of leeway in 2020, or would you call some of these towns have
Safe
a
harbor?
safe harbor?
No.
Or is it too late in the game for us?
So you have to create 0.5% affordable housing units in one calendar year. So that equates to about 40 units. So someone would have to come up with 40 affordable housing units within one calendar year and have an approved housing production plan to get 1 year of safety.
All right, so Mr. Bendel, and I think Mr. McCoy mentioned the site across from Textron a couple town meetings ago. The town approved a denser project there. Have you seen anybody come in front of that? Because that would certainly help with, I would think, affordable housing.
Well, there's no affordable housing requirement currently. So none of our projects have to build affordable housing.
Are there any projects that you see in the future that are, anyone come to you since the last time we saw you in June, I believe?
With affordable housing?
Or any housing, large projects?
No. There's the one that was at the last town meeting
Right,
on
that
Main
one.
Street,
Yep.
635 Main Street.
Right.
I think they're in the design phase, but I haven't seen more than what he showed at town meeting. There's talk about the Walpole Woodworkers site on.
Right, that's across from Textron, yeah.
Right. I haven't seen anything on that yet. I keep
Okay.
asking. So is there anything new?
I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But those two locations are available for affordable housing.
No, not currently, because we're above the 10%. But there's no requirement
You
to
would
build.
have to build affordable housing to maintain above the 10%. What do you want to do, fall below it and then require to build it? That doesn't make sense to me.
No, I think the point
It's
is
not
that
required
there
right
is
now.
no requirement in our zoning right now
Right.
for affordable, and people, developers, and certainly not going to be critical of them, they're looking to make money on their investment, and unless there's incentives to create affordable units, or there's a bylaw that directs them to create affordable units. And Valerie, you can jump in if you're aware of any. Are there any instances out there where market rate developers have created affordable units just because they thought it was a good idea?
No. It actually costs more to build the unit than you're going to get back. So you have to have a large percentage of market rate units to make up for the loss you're going to take on the affordable units. And I should correct myself, because we do require 10% affordable units in our over 55 district, which
And that's what Walpole was talking about, an over 55 unit, right?
No, it's Steve Wright off of Andover Street is building
Yeah, but
the
isn't
over.
also, I mean, you did rezoning purposely at town meeting with the thought process that that developer was going to do an over 55.
I haven't heard that they're going to do an over 55. We allow multifamily in general in that district by special permit, but it doesn't have to be over 55. And there's currently no requirement for any of it to be affordable. The only place where we require affordable is the over 55 district that has to get zoned that way at town meeting. So when they came in for Andover Street, they rezoned it at town meeting, was it 2 years ago? Or 2 meetings ago? That project will provide 3 units.
Foster's Pond.
Yeah, right at
Andover
Foster's
Street,
Pond,
yeah.
yep. So that's the only district we have, which you have to go to town meeting to get that district on your property. So it's a bit of a process, right? It's not an easy task. But otherwise, there's no requirement for anyone to build any affordable units, which we want to talk about over the next, year or so on how we can get projects to provide a certain portion of affordable units so that we're not falling back.
Well, how do you do that? No.
Inclusionary
Val,
bylaw.
You put it in the zoning.
okay.
So you say-
So are you waiting for a reason to put it in this? To put
I
it
want
forward?
to get it right because we could do 10% or we could do 15%. We could do somewhere in between.
How long would it take to get it right?
Well, I think it's going to take a lot of talking to all of the stakeholders, right? So developers, residents, boards, just to kind of balance what we want and also respect that developers are trying to make money.
Have you started that process yet?
Only just in conversation. So I imagine putting together, some sort of group to talk about it.
But the point
But
there
that
is
that thing is
you-
not going to get us to
Right, that-
10%.
No, you would rather look at selling town-owned land that we don't have surplus on, rather than doing that.
Well, we need.
And I'm opposed to selling town-owned land.
So I guess maybe it's helpful for the folks who are here, but so in 2020, we'll fall below 10%, and to get us back up to 10%, we need about 60 to 70 affordable units to get us back up to 10%. However, if we could do it another way other than selling town-owned land, that would be great. It's just an option that we have control over, so we could make happen.
I mean, you're our planning director. Is there not another option, another way? Have you been trying to do that for the town?
Well, I can't make someone build affordable units. I can encourage it, but I can't force them to do it.
Just a point of clarification, if I may. Is the 60 to 70 units by 2020 not built, it's on the books? Is that correct? With a
Well,
permit?
that's even tricky too. It depends what permitting process you go through. If you go through a 40B process, it just has to be approved. So it has to be an approved project. If you don't go through that process and if we put out an RFP and we got a developer on board, they would have to be occupancy. So that takes a lot longer. And I guess that's the timeline that we would be up against if we chose that route.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to try to put this in simple terms. We already have zoning on the book, and we're talking about an inclusionary zone. Some folks out there, I'm not saying because folks are here, I've said it before. I'm not playing to this audience. I've said it before. It's not like a political speech. Said it before. Let's do it in simple terms. We went to a town meeting and we allowed 10 units per acre, basically just 40,000 square feet. 4 units per 1 unit per 4,000 square feet, correct? Mm-hmm. We did Lowell Street and we did Main Street. Now, I got up at the town meeting floor months ago and I supported the Lowell Street 2 years ago. I supported the Main Street, the most recent meeting, and I did support Steve Wright's Foster Pond. I didn't want anybody to say, well, McCoy is anti-development. I'm not. I'm for orderly development. But the point I want to make is this, and I said this at the town meeting, not saying it tonight. I've said it months ago. And then we're talking about this inclusionary zone. We need to really tell folks what this is. So now, my hat doesn't go out to a developer. If he's able to put 10 small homes on 40,000 square feet, where most of us, I live in an R20 zone, so I can only put one house. Folks in R10, one house. R60, one house. So our heart doesn't bleed for these individuals. So you're basically putting 10 small homes on 40,000 square feet. That's all you're doing. Now, we talked months ago, I know you weren't here, the meeting I missed, but the one that Mr. Kyra alluded to, like in June, when that woman was here, you talked about inclusionary zone to get an understanding. You folks were talking back then, 6-7 months ago, maybe increasing it from 10 units to 13 units an acre, and then I'm hearing at this meeting, and I took notes, this talk about maybe doing even more than 13, maybe up to 15 or 18 units an acre. I'm not saying it to play, I'm just saying, I've said this a long time ago, that's just insane. So once again, my heart doesn't bleed for, like Mr. Langone, he's the one who got the property on Lowell Street. Mr. Walsh, let's call it who it is, he got the property on Main Street. They're gonna make a lot of money, folks. It's not like they're going poor, all right? Now, I supported that, and I said at the town meeting, this is it. I'm not supporting any more zoning changes until I see these units built, because the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. Mr. Bendel mentioned a moment ago, all you gotta do is drive down Main Street in Tewksbury. Wait until all the leaves go down. People are gonna be, having revolutions out in that area because of all the units that are being built. Mark my words. There's a big difference between Wilmington and Tewksbury. Main Street goes on forever in Tewksbury. Main Street's not that big in Wilmington. Lowell Street, I used to own a house and own a restaurant there. It's not that big of an area. Okay, we're gonna talk about future zonings. I'm curious about Textron. I'd like to talk about that when the time comes. All I'm saying, and I know I repeat myself, my heart doesn't bleed for these local developers when they're putting 10 units on, and we did that. That's insane for us to even think of increasing it. And then, that's why it just makes no sense. We talk about town-owned property, we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm on the same page with Mr. Kyra on that. And I've been on the board a long time. I said years ago, and I'm just saying, when I ran for selectman in 1987, I stated, I don't want to turn our community into another Everett or Revere. Now, 30 years later, 2017, I don't want to see our community turn into another Burlington or Billerica. That's what's going to happen. And once again, believe me, there's a lot of money to be. And I'll say another thing that I just found out. Now, when you take, for example, 5 acres, if you got 3 acres that are wetlands and 2 acres that are dry, do you count the wetlands as part of being buildable on those 2 acres? That's what we did, and I know I'm right. Like, for example, Mr. Newhouse did the article at the town meeting, Mr. Welsh's zoning, right? So in other words, there's wetlands. Doesn't the town incorporate, I've just heard this recently, so if you got, say, 2 acres of property, say 1 acre's wet, 1 acre's dry, technically, a common sense person would say, well, then you can only put 10 units on that 1 acre. You can put 20 because you folks got the bylaws. You incorporated wetlands to be part of that catalog, part of that count. Am I right or wrong? I'm right. I'm right.
So what's the question? If you have
question is,
wetlands, does that
They're
count
using
towards the
that-
development?
If you have wetlands into these multifamily zones that we're doing, you can use those square areas of that wetlands as part of the dry property, therefore even
As
increasing
part of the
it.
density. Yeah.
Increasing
so-
the density.
Right, so if I have a parcel that's this big,
Right.
I take the whole parcel for the density calculation, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I can fit it all on that parcel on the upland.
But you're
So you have
getting
to
a little more than you really should.
So the limiting factor on a very wet site isn't going to be the density. It's going to be the space to put parking requirements. It's going to be the space to put open space.
No, I
It's going to be
understand that, but
Yeah.
aren't you able to, let's say you can't use 10, let's say it's 10 units per acre. You have 2 acres, wet, 1 acre wet, 1 acre dry. Obviously, I'm sure a developer would love to put 20 units on the 1 acre, but if they can put 15 and they can demonstrate it, if it's in front of sewer, yeah, then they can definitely probably max that out. But the simple question is, it's a simple answer, and I know I'm right. You folks are calculating the wetlands as part of the dry area, so technically you can put more than 10 units on that 40,000 square foot.
Yeah, and that's how it is for every district. That's how it is for all zoning. You don't discount the wetlands when you calculate a density allowance.
Hey man, when I opened up Michael's place, I had a lot of wetlands. I couldn't utilize it back then, and it's amazing that they can do that now.
Well, you can't
You know.
use it, but you can. It's part of your parcel, right? So you can't, you can't put a parking lot on it, but you it is part of your land area.
All right, I think I
Yeah.
get my point. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
But you said something that I guess I want to, well, I'm compelled to respond to. I don't think anybody, and you certainly can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody envisions a great dream of Wilmington looking like Somerville someday. That's not the intent here. We all have a desire to try to the greatest extent as possible, preserve the fabric of what the town has been for generations and what we hope to keep it as for as long as and as much as possible. The state of Massachusetts has thrust Chapter 40B of the Mass General Laws upon us. We didn't choose it. Well, maybe we did. I don't know who voted for it when, but we've been under that for decades. So that's the world in which we live. I'm sorry?
Except Winchester, I guess, they're at 3%.
Well, and they're taking 40Bs.
And they're taking 40Bs. They're getting.
How are they getting away with
All right, thank you very much. So we just have to live in the world we live in. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? So in 2020, if we're under 10%, that doesn't mean on January 2nd of 2020, someone's going to come knocking on our door and saying, hey, we're going to put 100 units on Main Street somewhere. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but I am suggesting that if we're not proactive and we're not thinking about that at some point after 2020, if we're below 10%, just like Winchester and some of these other towns, where we are going to end up with 40B projects thrust upon us. And that's not, to me, that's not desirable. I'd rather have a say in it. And it may not be the ideal kind of development, but maybe we can kill a whole bunch of birds with one stone. Maybe there's a way to accommodate senior housing, which was clearly indicated at two town meetings ago. There was a desire to incorporate and have the town be more mindful and strategic about having some mechanism for senior housing so that folks who live in regular market rate houses now can downsize, stay in Wilmington, and have access to lower income or lower rate housing and stay in town. Senior housing right in town that would also potentially be affordable. Yes, it would be denser than regular market rate housing, but that accommodates those two audiences and contributes to our 40B ratio. So to me, I feel like I'm being a responsible elected member of this community by planning ahead and not panicking, as it were, in 2020 that we find ourselves below 10%. So
No, I understand, Mr. and I respect your feeling. All I'm saying is, if we're at 9.3, 9.1, even 9, the state is not going to jam it down our throats. I mean, we've
not the
showed due
state.
diligence.
It's
No,
not the
40B, 40B is the state.
well, the state's not going to jam a development down our throats. A developer's going to jam it down our throats using the state's law. But the state doesn't care. The state is just as happy to have it go in Winchester or any of these other cities. Yeah, please,
If I may,
Greg.
Valerie, I'll just wrap up my comments. Again, I should have prefaced it, but I do appreciate, I hope I don't come off the wrong way, I do appreciate you getting ahead of this, and the manager as well, and the chair. It's good that we're having this conversation now. It is a challenge. I don't think any of us just have the solution, and certainly, like I said, a lot of communities is facing the same challenge. We're limited, and when we start to talk about town-owned land, it narrows down to which property, because like Middleton, some of our property doesn't have sewer, so we can narrow it down quickly. So I just want to be sensitive to the votes that taxpayers have made in the past, and I would just encourage you that if you were to bring something, obviously it's brought to town meeting so the voters can ultimately decide whether it's a change to zoning or if it's a potential project that ultimately would go to town meeting so the voters could decide on what they wanted to do. And again, just in the year and a half I've been doing this, I'm challenged by two terms the most. One is affordable housing, because I mentioned that's a relative term. What my dad thinks is affordable is a lot different than I and others. So that's challenging. And then free cash, which I never liked that term. I don't want to go down that road, but I like taxpayers' cash better than free cash, but that's for another day. So again, I appreciate you being in front of this. I know it's not an easy task, and so I look forward to you continuing to look at all possibilities for the residents going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Hull, you had some
I
comments.
I think the reason that we started this conversation 6 or 8 months ago was to bring it before the board, essentially make sure that the board and the town was on notice that we are going to go below 10%, and that there will be consequences to that, whether they happen in 2020 or 2022 it creates a vulnerability for the town to be subject to 40B projects, which are denser than projects that would otherwise come to town, which we have very little control over, and which can take place anywhere. And so part of the reason for this conversation was to get a sense from the board as to the approach that the board is looking to take. Certainly, inclusionary zoning is a longer-term mechanism once we deal with the more immediate issue of trying to sustain ourselves over the 10%. It's not going to solve the pressing problem, which is dropping below 10%. What it will do, if we're able to get a larger project in that 60 or 70 unit range and keep ourselves over 10%, depending upon the level of inclusionary zoning, it may sustain us as continued development occurs. I agree that it's not that it's not the best option to be using town land for the development of affordable housing, but we don't really have a lot of options. We can't, I mean, I suppose we could take a piece of property by eminent domain and then use that property for affordable housing, but clearly that's a very costly proposition, and I don't think that's appropriate. So we don't have the ability to contact an owner of private property and say, I think with any reasonable level of success, and say, you own a 10-acre parcel, can we convince you to develop that property for affordable housing? Because understandably, people who own property, if they're going to sell it and develop it, want to develop it to make money. And the whole premise of affordable housing, or the requirements for affordable housing development, is that some number of units are going to be at market rate and probably a little bit higher to subsidize the units that you can't sell at market rate. So there's an offset of sorts. In the absence of using town property as a mechanism to encourage affordable housing development, I don't really see that we have a way of offsetting the prospect of going below 10%. I wish there was another option because, as has been pointed out many times, there isn't going, we're not going to be annexing more property. So what we have as a town, we have as a town. It's to some measure, I suppose, between a rock and a hard place. There is no question that the town, the residents 2 or 3 years ago agreed to purchase the property that abuts St. Dorothy's there were no specific purposes identified at that point in time, but I suspect there was not consideration given to the prospect of affordable housing. But that particular property has a lot of attributes because it has access to sewer. It's on Main Street, so in terms of transportation, to the extent individuals who might want to live in that location, they would have access to the Lowell line that takes you down as far as the train station at Big Joe's. So there's certain elements to that property that make it attractive. If the town was to go the route of using that property for affordable housing, there's no question that there's an opportunity cost loss. The town spent $1.75 million on the property. Instead of using it for ball fields or some other purpose, it would be used for affordable housing. I guess at the end of the day, the question is it more desirable to perhaps use property like that to try to generate affordable housing to service some of the people in town who have expressed an interest in it, and offset the prospect of having 40B projects pop up wherever? Or is it better to hold on to the property, use it for whatever purposes might be appropriate down the line, with the expectation that we have a risk of 40B projects coming in anywhere there's open property, whether you're talking about the property across from Mobile on the Run, you could be talking about the property, any number of places, the Sharapa property, the property on Middlesex Avenue, you name it. Wherever there's a piece of property that is open and developable, that is subject to 40B development. So I guess the last point I'll make is that I'm not looking to go forward with a proposal at town meeting to seek approval to use either the property at St. Dorothy's or any other property for affordable housing if the Board of Selectmen are not in favor of that. I think what I was looking to do is get some direction from the board. If the direction is we just as soon keep things as they are, then that's fine. We will keep things as they are and move forward, and we will deal with circumstances as they unfold.
Mr. Chairman, I'm reading right here. It says, I recommend to the board consider selling town-owned land to our next town meeting, which is going to be in April. I mean, I'll tell you where I'm standing. I'd make a motion that we don't sell any town-owned property, if that's the direction. I don't need to make a motion. I would hope to think everybody would probably support that. But we should, I think town-owned property is perhaps one of our greatest natural resources, at least have some open space in this community. I never was in favor of selling town-owned property for over 30 years, and I don't think we should start now. And I'm just one person. You want to hold a poll or whatever, because you're asking, before you know it, town meeting is going to be here. Okay, it's going to happen. You're going to start this process in about another 6 to 8 weeks. I'd like to say there's no way I would support a warrant article at the next town meeting to sell town-owned property. That's me. I don't know how you want to handle that, but at another time, you're the chair. If you want to handle it another time, get a vote. I'm happy to oblige.
I think the only vote that would potentially be taken tonight is to instruct the town manager to continue or to develop a warrant article. So I think that there's, otherwise, I'm getting a sense that there isn't. Let me say this. The observation I have is that the town did vote to authorize the purchase of the St. Dorothy's parcel, we call it that, the parcel that is around St. Dorothy's from the Archdiocese, 3 years ago? 2 years ago? Time has a way of flying. 2014. And, that was to serve, when you have an opportunity to take advantage of that kind of a purchase, it behooves the town to grab it when you can, because as was said then, they're not making any more open space. So when there's an opportunity to avail yourself of that at a price that was very favorable to the town, it was prudent then to do so, and it would be prudent again, I think, to do so if the opportunity presented itself today. So now that land becomes a resource, it becomes a tool to accomplish some goal, whether that goal is ball fields or that goal is whatever. I can't think whether that goal maybe is a new senior center or a new town hall or a new municipal building or whatever the case may be. That land is available and it's a tool. So that was 2014. We find ourselves now in 2017 really talking about, we didn't know then that we were really going to be facing this discussion. We probably should have, to be truthful with you, but here we are. And so I just view this town-owned land as a valuable tool in our ability to build a hedge against 40B, potentially, and also accommodate our seniors in town who we've all agreed that we need to find a way to accommodate that audience and accommodate affordable housing. Can we do affordable senior housing by the use of town-owned land? We're serving our population by doing so. That's why we took advantage of purchasing that land. So we're using, in my opinion, that's a reasonable use of that land. I'm not suggesting that I would be necessarily in favor of just handing it over, but I think there's probably a negotiable arrangement that could be made that would serve our seniors, serve low income, get us out of 40B danger, and frankly, be on our terms rather than on a developer's terms. That's why I argue in favor of at least putting it in front of the town meeting and letting the residents of this town decide if I'm right. If I'm wrong, then so be it. But that's where I was coming into this meeting. It's where I am at this moment. I sense I'm alone on that, however, but I'm certainly open to having a
Chair, if I
conversation.
may, I just, and I can appreciate your comments, I do. I just think that it perhaps may be a little bit premature that in 2017, we're going to rush to this decision. Ultimately, I think we all can agree we want it to go before the taxpayer, the residents, to vote on at a town meeting. But I guess the question would be, for me, is now the appropriate time? I think it's a little premature. I would like to take it under advisement, talk to residents, get some feedback on it, and then move forward from there. If in 2018 we have to address it at the 2019 meeting, we have to, as Valerie mentioned earlier, have something on the books. So we don't have to have something built by 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Chairman, but the need for over 55 housing is now. Okay, so there's the struggle that I have with it. And being on the Board of Appeals for as long as I did, and being part of all the 40Bs except for Avalon places, the Avalon East and West, or whatever it's called, it's not a fun process. And the developers that the town had for Regency Place, they weren't nice to the town. They got what they wanted because they appealed the decision. The Board of Appeals denied that decision. They went to the state Supreme Court and they won. And they got what they wanted over there, not what the town wanted. Metro, the developer, which changed hands several times, they were accommodating to the town. Whispering Pines, across from my house, an in-town developer, not so nice to the town. Yeah, he was at the beginning, but then when he couldn't sell them, he ended up getting 20%, and then some of them they were all supposed to be over 55. Then he asked and came in front of the board and begged, "Can I get a couple of these not to be over 55?" And he got that. So by looking at all options in front of the board, including possibly selling town-owned land, including an inclusionary bylaw, which I think we should be looking at sooner rather than later. And maybe a CPA. I don't know. It's something that we should be looking at for the future of this town. Because like we're all saying, I don't know anyone on the board that has said that they want to be 13 or 14 or 18 pieces on 1 acre land. I haven't said that, and nor do I want that. But if we want to be ahead of the 40B, the discussion needs to continue. I'm not necessarily ready to sell town-owned land tomorrow or next week or next town meeting, but we need to at least think about it instead of rejecting it taking it off the table now. We can't take it off the table now. It's a viable option.
What the town manager has asked us to consider is whether or not we believe that he should proceed with crafting an article for the upcoming town meeting. We're in October, and as Mr. McCoy astutely observed moments ago, town meeting is going to be upon us very quickly.
Right.
And that warrant comes into its early stages as early as January. I mean, we start to craft the warrant articles in January. That's right around the corner. So Mr. Hall is asking if we believe that putting an article at the May 2018 town meeting, putting an article on that warrant to ask the residents of the town how they feel about this issue. That's what he's asking of us. And I think, kicking the can down the road to a future meeting, I'm not opposed to that for, 2 weeks from now or maybe 4 weeks from now, but I'm opposed to it. And listen, I'll let Jeff chime in. If 4 weeks from now is too late, then push us. But if kicking it down the road to a future meeting gives members of this board more time to mull it over and talk with residents and get some feedback, I'm not unreceptive to that, but I also don't want to lose focus on this. And Valerie, you want to speak, please?
Yeah, if I can just say something about the timeline, just so you have information about that discussion. You can do permitting two ways. You could do, if we would want to put a parcel of land out for development. If we didn't, we would need the next 3 years if we were going to do it one way. And that way is to surplus the property, put out an RFP, select a developer, and then also be rezoning that property to our over 55 district, right? And then the project would have to meet the requirements of that district. So we would want the zoning to be appropriate, and the zoning would allow for a project. And that zoning would allow for the number of units that we need there with an existing district that we have. So we would need the 3 years, because if you go that process with our existing zoning, you need to have them built and occupied to count. The other option is to put out an RFP for the sale of town-owned land, development of the town-owned land, and you would have to go through the 40B process through the Board of Appeals to be able to have them count. I believe it's either approval or building permit, and I have to get clarification on that. But they count sooner if you go through that process. But that process would be able to be denied. So a developer isn't going to like that avenue as much. But it should, in theory, be okay because they're meeting all of our requirements, right? So there's two different ways you can go, and with each way, they count at different times. So the lengthier one, we're getting really tight on time, and that's just something that I feel like everyone should know when you're talking about waiting, and waiting's okay. It's just that I wanted you to know that.
So just to chime in on that point, the timeliness issue, if it was decided a year from now that we should go forward with the sale of town-owned property to address affordable housing, those units, because of the timing, even if they are applied to the 10%, because the census will have been done in 2020, they would perhaps benefit us 10 years down the line, but it wouldn't help us in 2020. Is that accurate? So there's a point in time where the census is complete and they're going to compare the total number of units of housing in town versus the total number of affordable units. And if we're below 10%, even if we get an extra batch of affordable units in 2021, we're still going to be below the 10%.
No, they'll count those. They'll add affordable units at any point when you apply for them. It's just that denominator number that won't change at the census point. But if we don't have the units counting by 2020, then during that time where we don't have them counting yet, because we've run out of time, we could get a 40B project in. So that's sort of the risk. And so if we wanted to pursue that option, we'd have to go sort of the 40B permitting route to have them count. So waiting just takes away that one option. It's still doable, but it takes away a more, developer-friendly option, I guess. And if we want, you always try to make it attractive to a developer to want to come in and build a good project. So,
can I just ask one further question? In terms of the individual that you consult with, who has certainly a fair amount of background in a number of other communities in Eastern Mass. Are there, we've focused on, the potential solution to offset this problem as being to use town property, because we need essentially a large shot, if you will, of units to address our problem. Are there other options that are out there that we're not thinking about? And you and I have had these discussions for the last several months, and I don't know that we've come upon any, but
Yeah, no, it's certainly, using a piece of town-owned land is a way that we can control our destiny, right? We can choose to stay above the 10% and choose to not have 40Bs come in. So it's sort of the only thing we have real control over, I feel. The other thing that could come up is if a developer approaches us about doing a 40B project on a parcel. But we can't make them do it. They have to come to us and say, I want to do this and I want to make everyone happy, because the Board of Appeals can deny that project if they don't like it. So it's risky for a developer to come in with a 40B project when we're at 10%. Some people do it. It could happen, but we can't force it to happen. So it's really the way that we figured out, the way that we can control it. We don't see any other ways of controlling it other than what we have in our control, which is a piece of our land. So it's not ideal necessarily, but it's a way that we can have control of what the future brings.
Not to beat the drum, I'll just be real quick, and I think I know the answer. You're talking about 10% affordable housing. So that's in a town, and in the city, it's the same rules, right? 10%? I mean, it implies...
every town. Yeah.
Right, every town and every city.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big difference between city life and country life. I mean, I think we should send a letter to our legislative delegations and say they should introduce legislation to say whatever formula they come up. Big difference between city and living here in the country. A lot of folks move from the city to the country. They should come up with a formula to have so many, maybe it's 5%, 7%, if the population's under 30,000. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever talked about that, but I think that's something that we should do. Send a letter to our legislative delegation. They should introduce legislation. Maybe it'll pass, maybe it won't. But I think you get a lot of folks that represent the country area, and the people and the folks in the city, Worcester, Lowell, Boston, they'd have to be sympathetic because they'll put 50 units an acre down in the city and they'll go 10, 20 stories up. I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but I just put that out there. We'll talk about that, but hey, you never know. Stranger things have happened, right?
Unless there's further questions from up here, do we have instructions, or do we have what's the will of you guys? Do we want to offer any instructions to Valerie and Jeff, or are we taking this under advisement?
I'd make a motion that we do not sell any town-owned property at the upcoming 2018 town meeting. I make that an offer of motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Well, again, I'm not opposed to bringing it, and you can bring any article you want to town meeting. My goal was just to have the residents decide. I was looking for a little time to talk to residents about this now that we've seen a pretty thorough presentation. We've had a chance to ask questions. Let's see I'm trying to respect the will of the voters. Just 2 years ago, and that's a short time for me ago, that they voted to purchase this land. And also I want to be very specific that this is the only piece of land that's a possibility. Is that correct, Mr. Hall?
It's certainly the most desirable, in part because it has access to sewer. So, for example, the former Whitfield property, because it doesn't have the sewer, a developer is not going to be able to have the same number of units in that location. So the premise here is, again, we're looking to try to satisfy what is the requirement that we generate 60 to 70 units of housing in a fairly short timeline here. And if those units were built as apartments, even if all of the units were not deemed so-called affordable, we would get credit for the full allotment. So if it was a 65-unit apartment development at that location, we would get credit for all 65 of those as affordable. That location next to the church has sewer, so that the density could be higher. It just has those benefits. The Whitfield property, we would not be able to get the same number of pieces of property, units. We have property off of Salem Street, significant piece of property. The problem is that wetlands create barriers to get in there. We've looked at that property a number of different times, and it just doesn't seem viable for this type of purpose. So, I'm certainly, I clearly understand the members of the board's concern about selling or transferring town property. Believe me, I get it. I'm just trying to look at a way to offset the prospect of an unfriendly 40B coming into town. That's really what my focus has been.
Well, if that's our only option, then let the people decide in April or May, whatever it's going to be. I don't want to get in the way of a single person. Let the people decide.
Well, we have a motion currently on the table here that, I'm sorry, Mr. McCoy, restate your motion, please?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we do not recommend to the town manager to tell the planning board not to submit an article at the annual town meeting of the last Saturday in April 2018 for the selling of town-owned property.
Okay, so that, I get the spirit of the motion. I'm fairly certain I get it. That has been, you seconded it again? So there has been discussion, but I want to make sure, you got any more to offer? All in favor of that motion? Opposed to that motion? So it's 3, it doesn't pass, Mr. McCoy.
All right.
So now I probably should offer the opportunity for a motion to do the opposite, to instruct Mr. Hull, working with Planning Director Gingrich, to craft language for an article for the next town meeting warrant to ask the people of the town of Wilmington if they're opposed to or in favor of the sale of town land.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not ready to make that motion. I, like Mr. Bender, would like more time to talk about it and maybe have at a future, in the near future, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, a selectmen meeting with a public hearing on this very subject so we can hear what the people of Wilmington want to say and talk about it. I know we weren't scheduled to do that tonight, but I would like more time to talk to the people before I make a motion to instruct them to do that. That's my feelings.
It's fair?
I mean, we did that for building the bridge. So, I
Yep.
mean,
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
It's that hot of a subject, because the need for over 55 is now, and
I just don't want to take away, I don't want to stand in the way of, people deciding.
Exactly, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that meeting, if the intent is to have some kind of a public forum on that issue, that it be, we look at the first meeting in November. I mean, time from our perspective is of the essence here because of the budget process and preparing articles and so on, so it would be beneficial to
13.
get some direction sooner rather than later.
11, 13. Well, we'll certainly take it up. Why don't we agree that we'll take it up on the 13th? In what format or what means that will come about, whether it's an open session at the middle school or whatever. We'll flush out what makes the most sense. But we'll certainly, we'll put it on the agenda for the 13th, absolutely. Is that fair for everybody?
Sounds good.
Thank you all. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate your continued education on these matters, just being here with us.
One quick, I know it's getting late. We haven't even talked about development in zoning. If we want to have her come back another time, I'm just curious, is there anything in the pipeline relative to Textron? I know there's a lot of property there. Has anybody been in to see you at all to talk about anything happening at Textron or even Sharappa's Farm?
No, there hasn't been anyone in about Textron. I think they're still in a little bit of operation. There's still people working
Yeah,
there
there's a
to a small degree.
contingent, 50 or so.
So I haven't heard anything from them.
All right, thank you. All right,
Yeah.
that's late. I'm good. Thank you.
Anything else for Valerie?
You mentioned Sharappa's Farm as well.
Well, Sharappa's Farm, has
Yeah.
anybody been talking to you about Sharappa's
There's
Farm?
people on and off talking about it, but no
Mhm.
one can seem to get anything going.
Still owned by the family.
Owned by who?
Sharappa Farm's off Andover Street towards Rattlesnake Road on the right side. You got Fiorenza Drive and you're going towards there. It's on the right-hand side. It's a huge parcel. It's like, what, over 100 acres?
66.
66? Yeah. The Sharappa family. I don't know, unless somebody bought it. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One more
Thank
thing,
you.
just to be clear, we can let residents know that November 13th, if they want to be heard, is this going to be put on the agenda for that?
We have another meeting between now and then, yes?
Yeah,
Right,
late
the
October.
24th.
Greg, we'll decide on the appropriate method of how that meeting will flow, and we'll advertise it
Thank you.
with lots of notice, and we'll make sure we understand. I don't want to make promises and not
Right.
keep them, so
Totally understand.
that will be more public as time goes on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
So, Jeff, I will navigate over to you for a highlight of communications that need to be brought to our attention.
All right. The first item is a memo from Valerie Gingrich to me regarding some fees associated with the planning board. The intent here is to adjust some of the fees. The last time the fees were adjusted were in 2004. So one of the things that has been put forward is consolidating some of the fees that are under site plan review and making fewer categories. That's one consideration. There's also a proposal for site plan waivers. Historically, there has not been a fee for that. There is an amount of work that needs to be done by staff to review proposals, even if a waiver is granted from site plan review. A number of these different categories, the over 55, for example, was not in play when the changes were made in 2004. And then you'll see at the very bottom of the breakdown of categories, signs, relief from parking regulations, those are all proposed at $200. The planning department did a comparison of our neighboring communities, and the fees that were that are included in this memo are right in line with what our neighboring communities are charging for similar approvals.
Jeff, because that's a memo, but I also see that item number 6 is a board to consider, I think, the approval of that fee schedule. So unless there's opposition from any of you, I'd like to maybe take that board to consider item up now while we're on the subject. Any objection to that?
Just a question.
Go ahead.
On the second sheet here, page 2, it's revised. This is what you're proposing, right?
Yes.
Just forgive me, the current, I'm looking for the difference here.
The difference between, so you'll note on the revised schedule, for example, currently there's a 0 to 4,999 square foot was a charge of $200.
So whatever's crossed out is the old one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to jump ahead, I saw that Valerie had stayed with us. Thank you, Valerie, for doing so, in case there were questions on that board to consider item. So item number 6 is a board to consider the proposed changes to planning board application fee schedule that Jeff just highlighted for us. Let's take that one up, if that's okay with you, fellows.
I'll make a motion as presented.
I accept that made motion. Is there a second to it?
Second.
I have a second from Greg. Is there more discussion about that or questions?
Is there a reason why you're eliminating the first one on the site plan review? It's not viable?
Yeah, I think it was just a desire, and certainly, Valerie, if you have more specifics, I think the intent was just to consolidate some of the categories of
I see.
fees.
Because it's not, it says it's supposed to be in red, but it's not in red.
Yeah, and
So
it's in
I
blue.
couldn't, okay, I see. It goes from 0 to 999. Okay, I
Right.
see it now. All right, sorry about that.
Yep.
Any other questions or discussion?
Yes, one
Greg?
more question, please. The ones that are not crossed off,
Those.
the fee stays the same.
That's right.
So this is, just to be clear, this is only for someone who's applying for a special permit for, say, a pet care facility or over 55 development?
So in in the categories that are changing, so over 55 was not, back when the last revisions were made in 2004, there was no over 55 district in place, so there
In
was no
addition to-
charge associated. So this will now make that consistent with multifamily housing. Similarly, with signs, relief from parking regulations and so on, those were non-existent before, so now these would be the charges for those types of requests.
When you say signs, you mean like advertising signs? What do signs mean?
Valerie's still
Relief
here?
from parking regulation, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Signs, I just actually crossed that S out, and I'm gonna put sign special permit, because that's what it is. So if you don't comply with the sign regulations, you can get a special permit for your special sign from the planning board. So if it's, a little bit bigger, you can ask for a special permit from the planning board and explain why you want the bigger sign. So that's for a sign special permit. If you meet the requirements of the sign bylaw, then you don't need to go to the planning board and you don't pay that fee.
And Mr. Manager, a final question here. The fees for these special permits, the money would go into the general fund?
yes.
In the parking regulations, Valerie, what is that? If they
You can,
want to park somewhere where they're not supposed to?
No,
What
it's
that
more
means?
so if you want to apply for to have less parking on your site. We find it with warehouses. We require a lot of parking for warehouses, but they have, 4 people working in there. So they'll come in and ask for, 20 parking spaces instead of 30. And on a case-by-case basis, they can get a special permit to have less.
Is that so they can make the facility bigger because they'll have now less parking?
Usually it's just they have that parking already, and they want to, make it into a landscaping, or they want to use it for, it's not usually used for a building, because if a different use comes in, they have to go back to the old parking number. So they usually leave space for it, but don't have it built out as parking.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There's a motion and a second. All in favor of approving this fee schedule? It is unanimous. Thank you, Valerie, for sticking out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing us to go out of order on that. I think that was a good idea that I had.
Next is a memo from me to the board, just explaining the status of the global project. This was written on the 29th of September, so at that point it was the request or the correspondence had come in from the proponents withdrawing their applications before the planning board and the Conservation Commission, and this memo essentially references that and includes a copy of the correspondence from their attorney noting those withdrawals.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say something real quick?
Please.
I just want to give a shout out. I'll tell you, if it wasn't for those residents opposed to Global, it would have been a done deal as far as I was concerned. I'll tell you, the big congratulations goes to the residents. If it wasn't for the residents going to those meetings, there would have been probably a different outcome. And that's where the true victory goes, those residents. They deserve all the credit for what they did. Thank you.
Next is a copy of the email that I received, amongst others, from Mr. David Ray with respect to the proposed substance abuse detox project. I'll just read it verbatim. Although the discussed potential detox project is much needed and worthwhile, it has become a major point of contention centered around me and my involvement. I was asked by a larger group of partners and Mike Kyra to lead the presentation, but unfortunately the project has become synonymous with me. I am withdrawing any involvement on all levels and wish the group success in any future endeavors they may have. Many of the statements made about me are unfounded, untrue, and disrespectful. I am deeply saddened that all the work over the past several years has boiled down to this type of negativity. Next is a correspondence memo from me to the board, and this is just noting that one of the other involved parties in this proposed substance abuse detox medical center, Paul Nealand, is evaluating his options as to whether to proceed with this site or to pursue a medical detox center in another location. And I just note that he is very mindful of the concerns that were expressed by residents at the board's meeting on September 25th. Next is a memo from me to the board. This is a follow-up in response to the board's request that I seek a legal opinion with respect to zoning at 362 Middlesex Ave. And I'll just read into the record what I received from Town Council. At the Town Manager's request, we have been asked to provide a public opinion as to whether the proposed detox center is the type of use which fits the zoning bylaws criteria in Section 3.4.6, hospitals and nursing homes, so that it is subject to requiring a special permit from the Board of Appeals. Given how we understand the proposed facility, which would operate involving an acute care protection portion for 3 to 7 days stay and a short-term stabilization portion for 5 to 14 day stays, we believe that it would meet the criterion given the way Massachusetts law requires that such provisions be interpreted. This makes the application subject to the Board of Appeals, board's broad discretion to act on the application for a special permit, including denial, grant, or grant with appropriate conditions, so long as the board is basing its decision on evidence presented to it.
And to be clear, in that statement, a couple of times he mentions the board. He's referring to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is correspondence from Tina Stewart, the library director, and this is just as a follow-up to the Mass Memories Roadshow that was held back on September 30th. It was a very successful event. The individual that she gives a lot of credit to, and certainly credit is due, is Charlotte Wood, who's the assistant library director. She submitted an application about a year ago for this Mass Memories Roadshow, and she was the one that really spearheaded the whole effort. Once we received notice that the town was approved for this project for the last 7 or 8 months, she's been involved in coordinating the preparation. There were 22 different community groups that have been involved in the effort. We had 25 high school students that participated that day, 240 attendees with 150 individuals who had a total of 411 photographs scanned. The premise of this, as you recall, was for residents of Wilmington, give them an opportunity to have photographs that had some meaning to them in terms of their experience here in Wilmington, have those photographs scanned, and they will be archived. This kind of project is taking place in communities across the state, and so folks took advantage of that. There were a number of community groups that volunteered: Elderly Services, Veterans Services, Historical Commission, WCTV, Wilmington Community Fund, 4th of July Committee, Wilmington Public Schools, Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce, the Catholic community of St. Dorothy's and St. Thomas, United Methodist Church, Abundant Life Church, Rotary Club, We're One Wilmington, Sons of Italy, Girl Scouts, Wilmington Little League, Cub Scout Pack 361, Wilmington Youth Soccer, Town Crier, Friendship Lodge, and AIM. And she also points out and wishes to acknowledge the financial contributions that were made by the Wilmington Rotary, Wilmington Sons of Italy, and the Wilmington Historical Commission. And we also had support from Heavenly Donuts, who donated some coffee and donuts, and Panera Bread, who made donations to feed the students who were volunteering. So
Yeah,
it
we
was
should add a little coffee and donuts tonight.
should have.
I'm going to comment. That was a cool event. I went down, I brought a bunch of photos and some memorabilia from the moving wall. Folks that have been here for a number of years will remember when we had the Vietnam Wall on the Common. So that was my contribution in conjunction with our veterans agent, Lou Samaglia. But as I was there was a number of folks kind of streaming in and out, and all the stations that were there were actively really engaged with residents. So I'm really excited to see how this all turns out. I believe the finished product will be available like on CD and also on a website. So I'm excited to see the final compilation of all of the efforts. Thank you.
Next, the board was provided with a copy of Comcast's Form 100, which is essentially their prospectus, if you will, in terms of their financial organization, their background about the company, and this is part of the process for license renewal, which is ongoing. It's really being spearheaded by Dee Casey, the assistant town manager, and she's been working with Bill August, who's cable counsel, as we reach a conclusion to the discussions. The expectation is that the final terms are close at hand, and a recommendation will be made to the Board of Selectmen. We're shooting for the meeting of November 13th. Next is correspondence from me to the board. I just wanted to make note of another project that Dee is involved in her spare time. She has been appointed to the local government workforce skills gap work group. This is an organization or a group that's being led by Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito. And Dee was appointed by the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and when she made me aware of it, I was only too proud to support her in this. So the intent here is this group, which is comprised of a number of individuals representing various state and local organizations, is to look at the challenge that we face both at the local government level and the state government level of finding qualified individuals to fill the roles that are being vacated as this generation of folks in public service retire. It is a challenge, and we've talked about it at some of my managers' meetings for a number of years. Various positions are really critical in terms of finding the right folks to fill them. And so the intent here, Dee and others will be working with the Lieutenant Governor to identify strategies and recommendations as to how we can cultivate public involvement in folks in the next generation to serve in what I consider a very honorable role as a public servant.
Thank you, Dee. Congratulations.
Next is correspondence. I provided copies of the letters that went out to the various local organizations in town who historically have been involved in race walks, different events that involve either road closures or details. If you recall, at the last Selectmen's meeting, I proposed that we establish a policy where groups that are looking to have these type of events give us adequate forewarning so that we can budget for them. This year, we're asking that these groups notify us by or before November 1st if they intend to hold their events again next year, so that and it really impacts the police department primarily, because obviously when you have road closures and events happening around the common, that we need to have details to make sure that the public is protected.
Through the chair. Jeff, on that, I know we mentioned about 10 town activities like the Horribles Parade, the Memorial and Veterans, and, you know, if there's a football game, there's police detail out there. And you don't need to, that's all under the town budget.
Right.
You don't need to include that
No.
in here for those.
Right, we account
Okay.
for those.
Okay.
We have correspondence from Pamela Goldstein, Associate General Counsel at Verizon. She's just noting the change in mailing address for their firm, so to the extent that we engage in correspondence related to the cable license we have with Verizon, she's providing us with the appropriate address. She then, under the next piece of correspondence, follows up by noting that she is the contact person in matters related to the cable license. And then under the last piece of correspondence, this came in later part of the week, I think it was Thursday or Friday, was correspondence from Michael Newhouse representing Global Advising that they are withdrawing their application to the Board of Appeals. So that was the third and final body that Global Montello had a request before. So at this point, as far as I know, the project will not happen.
Thank you, Jeff. We covered number 6, which is board to consider the planning board fee schedule, so we'll move to number 7. Board to consider Eric R. Randall as for his request as an appointment as constable. Jeff, recommendations?
Yes, recommendations. I have one from the town clerk. She notes, "I see no reason why Mr. Eric R. Randall should not be appointed constable. He will be responsible for providing a bond in the amount of $5,000 at the time of his swearing in." Also have a recommendation from Michael Bagonis, Police Chief. Wilmington Police Department has completed a review of Eric R. Randall and recommends approval of his request to become a constable in the town of Wilmington.
Thank you. I would accept a motion if anyone feels inclined to do so.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve Eric Randall to constable. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations and thank you to Mr. Randall.
Next is a request from Jean Chang, who is co-chair of the Wilmington Arts Council, that the board appoint Jeanette Corbett to serve as a member. Currently, there are 8 members on the Arts Council. This would make number 9. Per the statute that applies to arts councils, anywhere from 5 to 22 individuals can serve. She notes that Ms. Corbett has been an artist for over 10 years. She's made contributions to Wilmington in terms of assisting the Arts Council, and has also displayed some of the artwork at her own presentations. So I would recommend the board appoint Ms. Corbett.
Very well. Thank you, Ed. I'll accept that made motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion is made and seconded to appoint Jeanette Corbett to the Wilmington Arts Council. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much to Ms. Corbett for stepping up and for Ms. Chang for the recommendation.
The final item on the board to consider is a request from the Wilmington United Methodist Church to be authorized to place signs at the town common notifying residents of their upcoming fair, which is occurring on October 22nd. This has been a practice that has happened over the years, and I see no reason why this cannot be authorized.
Very well. I would accept a motion to approve that.
So moved. Seconded.
I'll accept it from Greg and seconded from Ed. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Very well. Thank you. Okay, so we are on the agenda under public comments. I'd like to turn it over to the audience for any questions or concerns. Before I do so, I recognize, of course, that a number of you here tonight were also in the room 2 weeks ago, I guess, and probably have very strong feelings and maybe passionate feelings about what was presented that evening. Certainly don't want to thwart opinions or thoughts or ideas, but we spent a fair amount of time at that meeting, and so what I just want to encourage folks, if there's questions or concerns or comments that are unique and specific or different than were already articulated, I think fairly comprehensively 2 weeks ago, please bring them. If not, we're not necessarily looking, I don't think, and I certainly don't think it's necessary, given that there actually isn't a proposal on the table. I don't think we need to rehash the entire meeting from 2 weeks ago. So we are under public comments, and I would invite anyone to speak if they feel so inclined. Yeah, if you don't mind, stand up and state your name and address, just so that we can have it on the record. And
Sure.
Don't give the number.
So my name is Jeff Wood, and I'm from Frederick Drive. And I would like to rehash everything we did. No. So one thing that was stated was the John Hopkins study, which at the time I wasn't sure, was that purely a mistake? Or was there truly a person named John Hopkins that made that? It's of course the Johns Hopkins study. As around here, if you had said, Mass General Hospital as MHG, you would have realized that was a mistake. And even Valerie today made a mistake on the 12,000 versus 1,200. She's an expert on what she's doing. She knew it immediately. So it really bothered me that the former lead backer behind here had no idea that his prepared text, the item they had up on the board, and other things was the Johns Hopkins study. But I just want to go into the actual specifics of this, because it was stated that we shouldn't worry about putting a detox center in Wilmington, because there's been a study done by the famous Johns Hopkins Institute, and don't worry about it, nothing more will change with crime. That study was done in 2011. It was using crime data from Baltimore, Maryland. If you go to city-data.com and you look at the crime index data across any city and town in the United States, the average crime index is around 285. Baltimore averages about 770 on an index. The other thing was, in the abstract of the study, it stated that this was a micro look at violence in excess of violence in Baltimore, Maryland. So they're already triple the index. So I really feel that you bring something like that, you're trying to say that Wilmington is equal to Baltimore, Maryland. It's not even close.
It's not relevant.
And one thing I feel that I didn't know, I certainly enjoy living in this town for the past 17 years, but in looking at the crime data, Chief Pagonis and our officers are doing a phenomenal job compared to the neighboring cities and towns. So in 2015, which is the last set of data that this has, we were at 82.6. To put that in context, Tewksbury's at 147.8. Wakefield, which was brought up as a kind of a place where it was okay to have some of these facilities, their crime index doubled in 2004 from 62.8 to 125.8, or something really close to that, from 2004 to 2006. And as the former lead backer had said, his homes had been there for 10 years. They closed in 2015. That was brought up at the board meeting. I'll take it back to 2005. So Wakefield went from 62.8 or something to 125.8 in that year. So I don't know, it could have been other things, right? But there's clearly an issue. So I just want to thank the Wilmington Police Department, because they're doing a fantastic job. They're keeping this a very crime-less society for us. We're a small town. Let's keep it that way. Why are we going to make it difficult for our police to do more work in bringing this kind of crime into our cities or into our town? So that's one specific thing, and I welcome anybody to go out there. Today I found the actual study, so it is online. And if you want to take a look at it, it goes into just how tight they made that circle to make it look like, even in Baltimore, there's more crime in a convenience center than there is at a detox center. So anyway, I feel that's an extremely skewed study, and never should have been brought up to say that we don't have to worry about it.
Right.
And so and the only other thing is, as I had asked the former lead backer, what the difference was in what he was talking about, and he had said at the time, you have to think about Foxborough Stadium and seats versus club seats, and how different the ATS was. So I went on the Mass Partnership site, which is where they have the regulations for this, and the acute treatment services that he was talking about, or I believe he was talking about, since he's no longer involved in the project and somebody else can tell us, this is an unregulated business. I'm as qualified to run one of these as anybody else. And I really feel as the leadership of this town, for something that I was educated to when I came here, I didn't realize about how serious the opioid issue is. It is serious. Why don't we talk to people who want to bring in an accredited one that's certified by the state of Massachusetts? These uncredited facilities are not what we need here. Clearly, there's an issue, so why don't we bring in other people? Let's, as she was saying, there's RFPs I guess you can do. Why are we doing that? Why would we take the first one that's going to come across our desk, right? Let's really take a look at this. We've got a serious issue. Let's do the right things by the people who need it in this community, but also do the right thing by the rest of the citizens.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, if I was looking for a new business, this is it. Because you don't need any qualifications based on what this is. And I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right about this. I would love to have been able to talk to somebody else. I wish I was more prepared, but in the transparency view of things, what did we know before we stepped into that room? So I actually took a chance to get online. I don't want to fan the flames. I think you guys have brought up before. You know, a lot of things got out on social media. A lot of things were distorted. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about the stuff I have found and say whether or not it's valid of this research I've done or it isn't. But let's have a bigger discussion about this because this is serious. And in all the cities and towns I've looked at, there isn't one that has a crime index below like 300. Remember, the average is 285. So everywhere this goes, as a tip of the item, remember this was our opportunity to be the tip. Other things pour in afterwards, and it's crazy. So you go to rehab.com, they have all the places that they certify. And there's a tiny town in Arizona called Prescott, and their crime and everything way out of control, right? And somebody said in there, it used to be a great little town, Victorian houses, everything else, which is pretty close to what we have, you know? So very, very disappointed in things that were presented, and I'd love to just have a more open discussion with all the research everybody has done. I want to thank you, Mr. Loud. I never knew about Banyan. I went down and looked at them on exit 39. Perfect place. But why do we have to have it in the center of town across from a liquor store? But more importantly to me, it's okay with us to have it 1 mile from our high school? That just seems crazy.
From
Yeah,
two
but
elementary
some other things
schools,
as
the
well.
soccer field,
Right.
a bus stop.
Right.
Seriously?
Somebody had brought up the fact that, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But anyway,
Well,
yeah.
I got a question, like all the research that you have done, thank you
He's
for
got
doing
even
that.
more right now.
Guys, folks,
Thank you for doing
we're in
that.
public comments, which really, it's not a free-for-all. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, sir, just state your name and just, we're trying to keep it for the record. Great, thank you.
So I just want to thank you for the research you've done. Just wondering if he did that kind of research, did the Board of Selectmen do that kind of research? Did you guys spend the time to go through that data fact finding to understand what it would bring to this town? As far as crime, was it an accredited institution, it's for profit?
Well, I did.
You don't have to, I'm asking all of it.
Yeah, I will tell you, I did a little, and I talked about it, but what was presented to us 2 weeks ago, we got it at the same time you guys did, okay? And we're not the governing body. The Board of Appeals is, okay? So they're the one that are gonna make the decision, not the 5 or 6 of us on these tables. But I did do a little research, and I asked my questions that I could. Because we get a packet on Friday night. I happened not to get my open mine till Sunday night that week because we didn't get it till late and life goes on. But I did do some research and I found Banyan and I found out a little about Mr. Ray. And I asked those questions that night. But I want to reiterate to everyone in this room and watching, the Board of Selectmen got the information about Mr. Ray and everyone else the same time you all did. And I had made my opinion about good idea, bad location during that meeting.
So fair enough, so I guess my question would be, you guys only found out a few days before you had this meeting. Who knew about this before all of you did? That represents the town. I can't imagine something as important as this
Well,
there wouldn't
I
be
will
any
say this.
discussions around it before a couple of days before you guys meet, and you represent us.
As it was stated 2 weeks ago, Mr. Kyra, the former town manager, I'm sorry, let me go back. As it was stated, that group, if they were serious and if they wanted to just proceed with having that business placed on that site, they could have chosen to pull for the permits from the planning board, and they would have gone through the regulatory process, which we would have never even seen it or heard of it. It would have been on memos that were coming through from the planning board, but it would have been going through that process, it would never have come before this board, and by virtue of that, it wouldn't have been before the town. Now, it might have gotten before the town, kind of the way the global thing did, when the planning board got it and started to publicize it. You folks probably would have said, oh, we got to go to the planning board. So that would have been probably your first opportunity to chime in. But what we did was what Mr. Kyra, recognizing that this was going to be an issue that would engender a fair amount of passions, he reached out to Jeff Hall and said, I'd rather go before the Board of Selectmen because I want to make a presentation to the town, because our meetings are televised. I want to make a presentation to the town and offer the opportunity for people to attend and engage and ask questions. So frankly, I give Mr. Kyra a fair amount of credit. I was more than willing, when Jeff called me and said, do you mind putting this, do you mind having a Board of Selectmen meeting that is outside of the norm for our Board of Selectmen meetings? Our normal Board of Selectmen meetings are what you just witnessed for the last 2 hours. They're not typically open forums. They're not, that. So we broke precedent, and we had the meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, an open forum, just to allow those folks to talk to you and present. So I didn't have a lot of information prior to. I was anticipating that I was going to hear the same story that, I was looking forward to learning more.
That's fair enough. So how do we work with all of you to support the people that are against it or even for it? I mean, how do we work with all of you to push the agenda?
There is no
whatever
I guess I'm not exactly sure I know how to answer that question, which has been lobbed out there in social media and otherwise. There's no proposal to be for or against right now. There's an idea, and I recognize that idea was presented 2 weeks ago, but the main proponent, what's his name? Mr. Ray, is not there. So Mr. Nealon, who was there with Mr. Kyra, has, I think, some type of a ownership interest in that site, but he hasn't decided what he wants to do with that. So, you can't, it's hard, you're clearly opposed to it by virtue of your numbers and your voice. And so I think all that can be done right now is what you're doing and making Mr. Nealon know that there's not a lot of buy-in or acceptance of that site for that use. Until there's a proposal and there's the regulatory process underfoot, and there's people that can actually vote on this in the form of the Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Appeals, there's no one else there's no other regulatory process that you can avail yourself of that I know of.
So it does come up in a formal way. Could we expect some support of the Board of Selectmen?
Well, you can expect the support of whoever wants to support your cause.
Everybody's there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate conversation. This is for everybody, so.
I'm not gonna make a comment on something that's not there right now. If it ends up at 362 Middlesex Ave, I will be there and support opposition, because it's not the right, I said it earlier, I said it last week, it's a great idea. Every town needs a detox center. It's not the right location. Mr. Woods, I believe, stated the crime. You bet my butt, I'm going to do some research. If it ever comes in front of the planning board, or ultimately, I said this earlier, the Board of Appeals is gonna make the decision, not the planning board. The planning board is gonna decide what the site might look like, okay? Same would have been on West Street with the planning board. But the Board of Appeals is gonna ultimately make the decision. As of right now, I look at the planning board agenda and the Board of Appeals meeting agenda every week. I was on the Board of Appeals for a long time, but I look at it every week. Because I have people emailing me, calling me, stopping me at stores, Eli's and Market Basket and CVS, asking me questions about all these, and I want to have a little knowledge about it. Yeah, we found out about the detox center a week or so before, but we had nothing in front of us until we saw it 2 weeks ago, like you. So I'm not going to make a comment on a detox center in the in the town of Wilmington until I see a proposal.
I'm sorry, Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll say right now is public comments, so we hear from public's comments. As soon as you're done, the next item agenda is new business, so selectmen can bring up items of interest. And I plan on talking about something under new business, but right now is not the appropriate time for me to make a comment. Just thought I'd let you folks know that.
Anybody good? Just want to make sure I'm giving everyone up here a chance. Did you have something, Greg? I thought I saw.
I'll just chime in, and then please, I don't want to come across adversarial here. I think you guys have very, very valid concerns, and like Mr. Loud said, we've heard them. There's no question, and I welcome the opportunity to continue to have conversations with people and hear out residents. That's my job. But as has been stated, and again, I don't want to. I guess I got to take my selectman hat off and put my Greg hat on. That if I was in favor of this, I couldn't put it through. And if I was opposed to this, I couldn't stop it. We're not the voting body. We don't have the jurisdiction. So I'm trying to be very objective about this. Again, there isn't a proposal on the table. Again, the concerns are valid. But any suggestion that I knew anything about this in advance is, I saw the same presentation, and there was some comments made about, well, you made up your mind after the 30-minute presentation. Well, others did too. I mean, all I said, my comments were, I stick to them. I'm not opposed to a facility like this in Wilmington. You know, for me to get involved in a private business sale is a tricky situation, because then we gotta stick our nose in all of them, and I'm trying to be very objective in my position that the people put me to do here. I hear the concerns, trust me. I see you here tonight. I've seen you in the grocery store. I had a student in my class ask me about it. That was a difficult task, you know. So certainly I recognize as a public official that this is a very pressing issue. There's no question about it. That's why I welcome you all here tonight. That's why we had the meeting 2 weeks ago. You're welcome to come. We don't have many people at the meetings traditionally, so it's nice to have some people, and we're here to hear your concerns. I'm happy to, you know, a lot of people have emailed me, have corresponded with them, people have called me. I'm happy to hear the concerns and certainly pass them along to, I guess, the members of the Board of Appeals. Ultimately, if there's a proposal, they'll be the ones that would vote on it. But, sure.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, sure.
I'm just curious, like, how do we know when it's going to this Board of Appeals? And, I mean,
How do you get in front of the Board of Appeals?
I don't know the process.
To act on, or to speak on, or to talk on. I know Mr. Ray seemed to be a very credible, experienced individual who seemed to know what he was dealing with and talking about. I did do some research on the opioid issue, and it is an epidemic. It's a crisis out there, and it needs to be addressed. And I don't know what the solution is, but there's no proposal out there now in regards to detox.
Yeah, and thank you. Certainly, I want to make sure you get your question, and you will, Joe. Forgive me. So the question, if I understood you right, is how will they know? How will the town know when and if Mr. Nealon steps forward and starts and engages the regulatory process, and it goes before the Zoning Board of Appeals?
So the application would first get submitted to the Board of Appeals, and they are required to post notice 2 consecutive weeks in advance of the hearing. So there would be notice in the town crier that would specify the date that this was going to be put before the Board of Appeals. It would also show up on the Board of Appeals agenda, which is posted on the town's website. So those, statutorily, anytime the Board of Appeals hears any matters, there's a public notice requirement, and they would have to subscribe to that.
Is that like a monthly meeting, or is it just they have special things and they set up a date, this is when it's going to be?
No, they meet monthly.
And that being said, that's the regular process. I can promise you this, that the moment that a permit gets pulled, or the moment that a proposal gets put forth, an application gets put forth, Jeff probably finds out pretty darn quick, I imagine, right?
Right.
Jeff will call me, I'll call you, okay? Within I don't know, I don't want to say promise 15 minutes, but really much faster than the regular notification process and websites and town crier. If I become aware through Jeff, through the planning process, in a matter of moments, I'll send a message. I have Ed, I have a few people's contact information here. I'll let you know, okay? So.
To say something at that meeting, is that, what's the,
Yeah,
I mean, how do we do that?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, please, Ed.
As a former
He's,
member of Board of Appeals and not only did what Jeff said, but direct butters get notified within 300 feet of the property. So you're gonna get a letter that there's the meeting. So several of you are direct butters. Rely on yourselves to do that. It will be a public hearing. The chairman will open that public hearing. You guys are gonna get the same voice you did 2 weeks ago, tonight, tomorrow night, next week, next year, whenever it is, if it even happens. Okay? The public hearing, in my opinion, on a case like this, is not gonna last one meeting. It's not gonna open and close in one night. It could, depends on what the board wants to do, but in my experience, it's not going to, because the people's voice are gonna be heard, and I hope it doesn't happen on Middlesex Ave, but that's the process that's gonna happen. I also recommend looking on the town website. It's a great website, a lot of resources, people out there, and you go on the planning board and the Board of Appeals meetings. The Board of Appeals meets the second Wednesday of the month. They're meeting tomorrow, the 11th. Okay? So just.
There's no application, nobody's doing anything right now.
So if an application was applied for by, it has to, for it to be in the next month's meeting, has to be applied for by this Friday, because of the things that Jeff mentioned in the notification by law and legal that the abutters need to know. And
It's not only the abutters, I would add, it's the abutters, but then the abutters to the abutters. So you
Right.
have the individuals who are directly abutting this piece of property, and then their abutters within 300 feet, I think
Right,
it
it's
is, of the
300 feet.
property.
Right. So it's everyone with the 300-foot circle around that property, including B&M, which owns the railroad tracks. They get notified. And Mr. Doucette will get notified because of his gas station right next to it. And so those will be notified. And Bob knows the process. He was on the Board of Appeals. He was a selectman. So that's, you guys will be covered. You just gotta be alert. And like the chairman said, the second I find out about it, I will let people that I know in here know about it.
And we all know Robert Hayes is going to tell everybody pretty quick too, so.
Yeah, yes, so.
I'm sorry, I don't want to thwart conversation. Is there anything else? Yes, Maureen, please.
Can I just ask a question of Jeff? When you read the letter from, I don't know if it was Mr. Ray or Mr. Nealon, about the planning board and the special permit to the Board of Appeals, did the special permit have to do because they want the short stay stabilization part of detox for the extra stay? Otherwise, would it have just gone to the planning board? Like,
No.
why is the Board of Appeals special permitting process involved in this?
It's because of the fact that it's a general business zone, and this particular use within that business zone requires a special permit. Within the zoning bylaw, there's a page that literally identifies the various zones in town and the various types of uses, and next to each use, depending upon what zone it's proposed in, the use may either be allowed by right, in which case there is no need to go for a special permit. In other cases, like in this particular circumstance, the use is allowed, but it is allowed by special permit. So the Board of Appeals has to hear the case and determine whether or not they will approve of it.
So it's for the whole use of the facility, because I thought you mentioned a 5 to 7 day period and then an extended period of days.
Right, so the presentation that we were given talked about two different categories of stay. One was, I think, 3 to 5 or 3 to 7, and then the other was 5 to 14 days. So as I understand it, that was the model that the detox center was operating under in terms of how their medical treatment would work. So, but that did not, that in and of itself did not prompt the need for the special permit. It was by virtue of the fact that this particular use, substance abuse medical detox center, was proposed in this particular area. The zoning bylaw stipulates that it be, a special permit would need to be granted by the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
I'm sorry.
Let me just make sure that
Yeah.
nobody else wants to speak before I let you go twice. Anybody else would like to speak? All right, bro, sir?
Right, I'm sorry, I know you gave me all the time. I just, at the end of the questioning the last time, after everybody got up and spoke, Mr. Kyra pointed to the board, so I'm not sure who he meant. I should have said the former town manager, not to say our current Board of Selectmen, and said, I gave you those statistics, and I gave you those recommendation letters that the former lead backer was talking about. So you did get a little bit of, somebody got a little bit of information. Mr. Hall, I don't know if that was you. So what was he referring to?
So those were letters that were provided, I think it was one of them, I don't have them in front of me, but one of them was the Board of Health.
I remember the specific. One was a recommendation letter. We got these on Friday night in the packet that Mr. Lau talked about. One was a recommendation letter from the Wakefield Police Department chief. One was a recommendation letter from the Board of Health in Wakefield. And the other was from a resident, a former resident, Mr. Fullerton, who I think spoke at the meeting.
So just to be clear, some of that information, when the first meeting took place, the meeting with staff, so I was contacted by Mike Kyra back in August, indicating that there was an individual that was interested in the prospect of establishing a substance abuse detox center in town. Would I be interested in having the appropriate staff together to learn about this? I certainly, had no reason not to. There's no question we have a problem in Wilmington, as everybody else does. So we had that meeting in August, and I believe some of those recommendation letters were presented at that time. And then in the lead up to the meeting on the 25th, Mike Kyra provided a packet which included those letters again to provide to the Board of Selectmen. So that was part of the package that he provided to our office to distribute to the board with their regular packages that go out in advance of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, go right ahead.
I just had a, looking at this, listening to this, and then the 10% with the affordable housing thing, it just seems to be a parallel in that we're not getting out in front of it. We're waiting for developers to come in, a piece of property, developers to come in with the affordable housing and pushing us into 403, 40B. Would it be better to get out in front, to get maybe committees and folks like Mass General Hospital, or, they have developing, they're looking to branch out into the suburbs. Beth Israel, they have substance abuse experts on hand, psychiatrists and things like that. We have a substance abuse coordinator. Is there any way that coaching her, she could get together a committee to maybe make a proposal and look at zoning in town for proper pieces of, we need it, so obviously, poor kids have got it. I'm just saying, the other thing, you get out in front of the housing thing, and it's just the parallels. It just seems that we don't have enough foresight yet in this town.
Well, if we didn't have foresight before, we'll hopefully have it now. By virtue, this certainly rang the bell.
And I appreciate that observation, and I hope that we can do exactly that. I think Mr. McCoy is probably going to enter some conversation about zoning or something, but we can't sit back and just wait for the next one to happen. We need to be more proactive on this issue as well, and I appreciate those comments. Greg, did you have something?
And if anybody has any questions, I don't want to jump ahead, but one last thing I would say, and not just everybody here, but obviously on record at home, if you own a piece of property in Wilmington and you are interested in, going into business with Mr. Nealon, I would encourage you to reach out to him. I only own one property. It's not, it's on Burlington Ave. It doesn't meet the criteria, but if somebody owns a piece of property in another area, reach out to them. Perhaps they want to go into business with them, or maybe in a different location.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure,
What's-
but
Didn't we say it could be in R10, R20, general business?
Well, we're
I'm
talking
not-
about 40,
That's
40B
40B.
application,
I
yeah.
apologize.
no problem. No,
I thought you were talking about.
No, it's a valid question. I'm not, you know, and again, I'm not trying to be adversarial. I'm trying to be proactive, and to your point, you know, proactive, trying to be part of the solution here, folks. If somebody owns a piece of property,
I just don't think anybody in our group is really that enthused with the group that they put together as investors. Right? They had one guy and everybody else is just little money people. I think if you got together with hospitals and medical professionals and substance abuse professionals, I think he'd come up with a better plan. You know, and there's plenty of money to make the money handle the fish and flower.
Well, and I might add, one of the challenges, unfortunately, as I understand it, is that Florida, because of the lack of regulation, there's been a lot of bad experiences, and it seems to have cast a long shadow on this whole idea of detox centers. So it's almost like a scarlet letter when someone talks about a detox center in a community. The immediate response is, we don't want that here. Well, these people are not, you know, worthy of the scarlet letter. They have problems. It's a medical condition, just like those people who treat with psychiatrists, those people who treat for any number of ailments. It's just unfortunate, in my estimation, that, you know, there's such a, you know, a bad rap that goes with detox centers.
To me, it seems like
It's small detox centers.
It's the safety of our kids.
Located in certain areas, so it's not, that's apples and oranges.
Statistics.
What I'm saying is, like Mass General, Winchester Hospital, they have security. Mass General has a fantastic security department. Winchester Hospital is pretty good too. They'll be on top of it.
Tewksbury
They won't be-
Hospital has the
They won't be
state
hiring
police.
$10 an hour security guy. You know what I mean?
To me, it feels like there's a two-step process. One is identifying where are the right places for this kind of a place to go, right? So and if, you know, we and planning and zoning, and so where's the right place? Where in this community would a place like this be least offensive? And if we can identify that and then create the zoning that speaks to that, that's step one. Step two is then we need to strategically, and maybe we do these concurrently, but strategically reach out to and identify the organizations that are bona fide and reputable that would be well suited for placement in our town. That doesn't happen in a month. That happens over time. So, I mean, that's the work that has to happen. And like I said, we got our bell rung 2 weeks ago here in Wilmington. It's still ringing. So I'm sorry, I don't have the answer as to where's the right place and who's the right company. But I think that message has been heard very, very well, and I pray that we'll be able to deliver
There's a lot of
that to you.
really smart people in this room.
I hear
They
you.
have a lot of contacts in the medical field. And, you know, they know who to approach and what organizations. And they have money people in those organizations. They might be not-profit or not-for-profit, but they have a lot of money in big endowments. They can build a facility.
I'll just simply say, stay tuned. I mean, as any of this momentum starts to gain momentum, you're all going to be apprised and informed, and as at whatever the appropriate time is, the experts that you're referring to, please chime in and speak to the manager and speak to Shelley Newhouse and speak to Samantha Reef. Those are the folks that are really kind of spearheading this charge. We're going to work with them as well, but you know, that's where we are tonight, folks. I respect and admire the passion personally, and the concern that folks have about those that are afflicted with this disease. But I also, you know, I respect and I acknowledge the passion of the folks that are, you know, really looking after the neighborhood and your property values and safety. You know, we have differences of opinions sometimes, but if we can have common respect, I think hopefully we have a pathway that would be beneficial for everybody involved. That's my hope, my goal. I'm sorry, did someone have something they wanted to say here? So, anything else from the public on this, or anything else for that matter? We're going to continue on then under new business then. I'm sorry, Jeff, did you have
I'm
something?
good.
You look- So, new business, I don't know if there's anyone that wants to chime in first.
I'll go first.
Mr. McCoy, you're
Okay.
up.
Usually we go right down the road, but I'll go first.
Take it.
You know, I know it's late and I'll be quick. And I absolutely agree with the residents. I think the message was loud and clear that folks do understand the issue on both sides. It definitely needs to be somewhere in Wilmington, but the location is absolutely not suitable for that location. And I remember saying back then, we have a lot of area in the community that's zoned general business that abuts neighborhoods. And over the last couple of weeks, I've reached out to many folks. They've called me at my homes. I return calls. I met people at their homes. They're really concerned. How do we address this, making maybe a winning in both sides? Absolutely a zoning change. So what I did, working with the residents, I prepared an article to call for a special town meeting to basically make a couple changes. But this is an article, not a Board of Selectmen's article. It's an article that I wrote, and it's to form, it's legal, and I'll touch upon it, and believe me, it's very detailed, and it will very, very detailed. So a couple of things real quick. You have to do a couple of quick changes. For example, you have to change the principal use. So right now, in principal use, real quick, 3.4.6, hospital and nursing homes. So real quick, what I did was, you had to look at the definition and then insert at the end of the text, exclude detox center. Then you got to create a new principal use. For example, it'd be 3.4.9, and then you put detox, and you give the definition of what detox. So there's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. Number two, insert definition of what a detox center is, okay? Which I did. But I'm going to go back to, let me touch about still on number 10. And I'm looking at it, and I say, all right, we need to make a zoning change. Folks know that it doesn't go in general industrial, but it goes in neighborhood business and general business. And I'm looking at it, and I'm writing it up. And I'm saying to my wife, I go, hon, I can't believe this. It's almost like that movie, if you ever saw My Cousin Vinny. He's sitting down with the girlfriend at the diner, and he's looking at that photograph. I know there's something there, but he doesn't see it. It's the tire tracks with Marissa Tomei. And I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, wait a minute. The gentleman over there is absolutely correct. It says special permit in R10 zone, special permit in R20 zone, special permit in R60. So not only can it go in a general business area and abut your neighborhood, it can go right smack in the middle of your neighborhood. It can go there. So what I did was I made a complete change. I said no to everything with the exception of general industrial, where it should belong, SP, special permit. I put no to everything. And believe me, folks, I spent a lot of time, and this is completely legal. And like I said, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. And then that's on page 10. Then on page 13, right, it says under classification of government institution and public services, 3.46, hospital and nursing homes, like I said. I put down at the end of the text, exclude detox center, and created a new line of saying what a detox center. This will stand. All the bottom line is, folks are really concerned. I understand. I get it. And I think the bottom line is I wouldn't want to be looking in the back of my neighborhood to see this. Now, I know folks want it. And let's talk about a hospital. This place, if they took care of stroke victims and they walked around your neighborhood because they're getting rehab, you're not going to say too much. Somebody had a hip replacement, like myself, you go to rehab, you might walk with another person in a neighborhood. But when you're at the infancy stage of detox and someone checks themselves out and walks in that neighborhood, there's concern. But I get it. This is an epidemic at the local, state, and federal level. I even said President Trump's even saying we need to do something about it. So I know I spent a lot of time, so I've worked with residents. I'm just telling my colleagues, I put up an article. We're going to be calling for a special town meeting. I'm working with the residents, and we're going to need a minimum of 200 signatures, obviously, to do this. And I think it's a win-win in all situations. We've designated an area in general industrial where it should belong when we talk about security. It's a lot safer in that area as opposed in the back of someone's neighborhood, or better yet, as the gentleman said, R10, R20, R60. It could be right in the middle of it. So I know it's a long night, people are tired, so that's what I'm doing. I've been sitting with the residents and working definitely with the residents in this. And I'm with you folks, and I'm sure other people are with you as well. And this ain't the right place for it. It belongs in general industrial. Let them put a 200-bed unit somewhere. We don't care. And it's be more of a moneymaker in that area, folks. And that's what I'm doing, so I just want to let the folks know that. That's all. And it's with it's the residents. All right, thank you, Mr. I know it's late. I know everyone's tired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. McCoy, I think I appreciate you acknowledge or letting us know that what your efforts are. I alluded to this two-step process that I envision, and my first step was, identifying the right zone and crafting language to accommodate that. Sounds like you've gone in that direction too, so we have common ground there for sure. I guess I don't share your observation that we ought to have a special town meeting for that. I think I was hoping that would be the kind of language that the Board of Selectmen could craft and put forth and put on the warrant for the regular town meeting for the town to consider and vote on as they do all other articles at town meetings. So the idea of this as a regular town meeting and the expense and costs and logistics associated with creating a special town meeting just for that purpose, I don't know, it seems like an unnecessary layer while we can, I think, work together to craft the right language and put it on the regular town meeting. But you're just talking about an idea here, so we're not voting on anything. I'm offering you my observation back to your observation. So food for thought there. But please,
If I may, to the manager, I think it's been a while since we had a special town meeting. I can think of the rink and maybe the high school. What's the estimated cost if we were to have a special town meeting?
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $8,000, $75,000 to $8,000. And we pay for the details for the police. We pay for the tellers, staff from the clerk's office that have to be there. So there is custodians. There's a cost to that.
I'll just say this if I could. I'm working with the residents. Whatever the residents wants to do, that's what we'll do. But the bottom line is, I think $7,500 or $8,000 is well money spent to accomplish what we need to accomplish at a special town meeting. But if the folks out there say, all right, let's bring it to a town meeting, I'm all ears, but I'm with the residents on this, and I think it's well money spent, believe me. And I could pick a few things in the budget where we spent well more than $8,500 in certain areas. This is well money spent, and it kind of gives that comfort level of people they can sleep restful at night with their kids. And once again, we know it's a situation, and we need to help those folks, and everyone's sympathetic to that, but not in that abuts our neighborhood or in our neighborhood. Put in a general industrial zone, that's where it belongs. But I'm gonna leave it to the good folks. I know I'm gonna be talking to several of them after today, and whatever they want to do, but the feeling I had is, and I still agree, special town meeting, be more money spent, and you could probably get it done fast. A couple of months, I think.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you.
Are you all set, sir? Ed, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. As in the past, when I became on the board, I like to do a shout out to some veterans or first responders. I want to talk about more of a personal first responder who lost his life over the weekend. His name's Lou Remigio. He is a Somerville policeman, one of the best policemen I've ever known. I've known him personally for over 12 years. I was with him on the 25th, the day of our last meeting, playing golf in a golf tournament. He lives in Tewksbury. I know it has nothing to do with Wilmington, but I just wanted to shout out to his family. He was a great human being and a personal loss of mine and a lot of people in this town and this state, because he's a great person.
Sorry, Ed.
I want to start on that sad note, but on a real good note, we have a Wilmington resident. His name is Nick Troy. He's a senior at the Citadel, which is a military academy down in Charleston, South Carolina. This past weekend, Nick, along with his fellow cadets, received their class rings in a tradition ceremony entrenched in the history and symbolism of the Citadel and generations of cadets and alumni who have studied there, graduated, and served our country. Upon graduation, Nick is going to be in the commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps and looks forward to serving this country. Just want to shout out to him and his family and thank him for his service. And I got this note from our chairman, Mike Shampoo. Anyone else that has a veteran, someone in the service that needs a shout out at these meetings, because it's a pretty unique forum that I have, I am all for that. Send me an email, send get a hold of me somehow. Be more than glad to do the shout-out. So thank you for the Troy family. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Ed.
Chairman, if I could, real quick, I don't want people to think I'm holding my kids' homework here. No, here's the actual article. I want folks to see it. It's all written to form, and I just want to show it. So it's not like I'm flashing the town cry in front of folks. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
I'm going to go in line. I just want to, well, thank you, Ed, for acknowledging Nick Troy. He's such a good kid. He really is. I say kid. He's a young man now, and he will be serving his country in the Marine Corps come the spring. If and when you see the Troy family around, and there's a number of them, so you can't miss them, please acknowledge Nick to them. I wanted to also acknowledge and just thank all those that came out last week to the substance abuse awareness vigil that was held on the Common. Kind of ironic that I'm bringing that up tonight, but the sentiment was important. There was a lot of observations made about so many folks that have lost their battle with this disease, but there was also a lot of hope conveyed by a number of folks who are winning their battle. Sir, could I ask you to just shut that for me, please? Thank you very much. So yeah, just kudos and thanks to all those that came out and all those that were involved in that, including Samantha Reef, who really was the spearhead and organizer. I thought it was very well orchestrated, and I thank the public for being there. So that was my only issue under new business. Kevin?
No, I'm good.
Very well.
Just have one thing. Monday, October 16th is a welcome to Wilmington reception, so anybody who might be new to town, it's at the library from 6 to 8. Last year was a great experience. I attended, and it's certainly a good opportunity for new residents to ask questions and to find out about all the great things that Wilmington has to offer. So that's Monday, October 16th at the library, 6 to 8.
Thank you. Jeff, any comments or important dates?
Under important dates, we have the Farmers Market, which continues on Sundays through October 29th, Town Common, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Flu clinic at the Town Hall Auditorium, 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. That's on October 11th. And also, same date, brush drop off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. October 13th, the Carter Lecture Fund is hosting the Singing Trooper, Wilmington Middle School, 7 p.m. October 14th, brush drop off Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. As was noted, the October 16th is a Welcome to Wilmington reception, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. October 18th is a brush drop off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. October 20th is the Haunted Woods at Harnden Tavern, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. October 21st is another brush drop off Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and also another opportunity to go to the Haunted Woods at Harnden Tavern, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Board of Selectmen's meeting again is on October 23rd at 7. Then we have curbside collection of yard waste from October 23rd to November 25th. October 27th is another Haunted Woods presentation at the Harnden Tavern, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. October 28th is a dedication of the Lawrence H. Cushing Gymnasium at the high school, 10 a.m. to noon. Another opportunity to go to the Haunted Woods. Harnden Tavern, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. That's October 28th. The 29th caps it all off with the Horribles Parade, Rotary Park, 4:30 p.m. and they'll proceed down Church Street. November 5th, we have one more. This is the Harnden Tavern Open House, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Town offices are closed on November 10th in honor of Veterans Day. And then November 11th is the Veterans Day ceremony at Town Common, 11 a.m.
Thank you, Jeff. Unless there's anything else, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much, and good night all.